Welcome to Dice and Mind, a podcast hosted by Browne and Jason Kaufman to explore the intersection of life, games, science, music, philosophy, and creativity through interviews with leading creatives. All are welcome in this space.
You know, we talk a lot of Trek on our show, even though we have a lot of interests outside of it.
Yeah.
It goes without saying that, there are a few games that we absolutely adore. A lot of games that we love. Very few that we absolutely adore. One of them, obviously, Star Trek Adventures.
Yeah, this is
by
true.
Modiphius. And Modiphius has become one of those companies that I just enjoy their content. Black Friday didn't do me any favors with the pocketbook this year.
No, but you did them a favor.
Yeah, I did them a favor,
Yeah.
right? The only thing that I missed during this holiday season was a new Star Trek Adventures book. We know that stuff is hanging out there. We don't have inside info, but there was a part of me that's like, oh, it would have been a good time for a new source book or something like that, which is, since we couldn't get that during the holiday season,
right?
Let's go with one of our next options and bring back a friend of the podcast.
Why not?
Jim Johnson, who is the project manager for Star Trek Adventures.
Yep.
At Modiphius.
Yeah, just a wonderful guy and a wonderful creator.
And you had the luck, I know we've talked about this a little before, but you've had the luck of when he was up in your city for the holidays to spend some time with family.
Yep.
You got to spend some time with him as well.
Yeah, really, really long lunch. As he will point out in this chat in a moment, at some point, we spent as much time at that table as we do when we record with him. Maybe actually even more.
And I was going to say, we started this in the middle of 21, right? The latter part of
spring of 21.
So we're coming up on 3 years.
Oh,
this will be the first. You are the one that, if I remember correctly, Jim is the first guest that someone on the podcast has met in real life. You have blazed that trail for us.
Who, I suppose, first guest who we didn't already know, who wasn't already a friend or colleague. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, we've had friends on and such.
Yep, that is absolutely
so like
true.
When Aaron Peterson's been on.
Yep, and
Rob
Rob
Aaron, we've had our friend Browne on.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, Jim, as you said, Brett, Jim really has become a friend. And when I say friend of the podcast, like, we don't mean that for marketing purposes. He's a heck of a guy. He's a heck of a person. And like you'll hear, everyone, with this interview, we meandered even more than normal because we didn't invite him on the show to shill a product. We didn't invite him on to tell us about something upcoming. We had a loose idea of how to begin because of something he brought up while he and I were having lunch, a month and a half ago. And then we just let it go because that's the kind of person he is. And as always, we're so grateful he's took time with us.
Before we head over, you bring up a great point. And I think it just is, it's almost tangentially interesting that he is in his role with Star Trek Adventures at Modiphius, because we'd have him on and we could just not even broach products or anything you're going to find in the
that's right. You'll hear that we get into a hypothetical product because Jim and then Brad jumped on the bandwagon of taking something I said and just beating the heck out of it. But I still like that idea. But that's it. I think you're exactly right, Brad, that we simply enjoy chatting with Jim, and we think that those discussions are relevant and interesting for our broader listenership. We would want to hear. It's kind of like when we listen to continuing conversations with Jim and Michael Dismuke, right? We listen because not for some great secret, but because it's worthwhile and we enjoy listening to the discussion.
You encountered it up at home when you sat with him for hours talking. We'd probably do the same thing if we met Michael. We'd probably do the same thing if we met some of our other guests. It's just funny how we have Jim on as a guest, not even so much because of STA. We have a Jim on as a guest because we always have great conversations about gaming, He's been doing gaming for a long time, so he has great insights on things. We talk about society. You'll see toward the end, we talk about reading and history.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where we don't, we have an idea of what maybe the topic might be for the first 10 minutes.
And then
it ends
go.
up being the first 30. And then the next hour and a half is everything else under the sun.
Everything under the dice. On that note, this is, because we were chatting with Jim Johnson, an exceptionally long episode. And we decided we're not going to break it up. That you've got a couple weeks. Chill, we're back with you. And we have more people lined up. You're not going to believe it. I mean, you'll believe that part, everyone, but you're just not going to believe who's on the docket. But we just thought, let's just give you as much Jim Johnson and all his glory as we can. So here's the whole thing. We'll see you in 4.5 hours. Just kidding. Jim Johnson was born about the same time Apollo 12 landed on the moon and has always been kind of spacey and shares a birthday with the Kindle. He is the author of the Pistols and Pyramids Weird Western series and the Potomac Shadows Urban Fantasy series. He's also written a bunch of other stuff in and around the sci-fi and fantasy genres and pen and paper RPGs. He's currently the project manager and line editor for Modiphius' Star Trek Adventures RPG.
There's no point in doing any long introduction. Jason Jason, you're going to record that. You're going to have already heard that before we talk here. So our friend Jim Johnson from Modiphius is back with us. But no more needs to be said. We'll just jump right into it because we were talking about long socks and shorts and deep freezes here in the U.S. And
that's all we're going to say.
Yeah, and in talking with when we were on continuing conversations with Jim and Michael. Michael even said, I just hit record because then we won't miss anything.
Yeah. So we're finally, Jim, welcome back.
Yeah. Thanks for having me as always. It's been a little while since the holiday break and a little while since I've been on the show, but I don't know if you've told your listeners in the last couple of episodes, but we had I holiday quote unquote I holiday in Minnesota where my in-laws live, and it just happy circumstance managed to catch up with Jason at lunch one day, and was really sad that we missed out on Brad, but understand the circumstances just with all the life and challenge and scheduling and all that stuff. But had a great time, and miss you both, and looking forward to seeing you all again in person someday soon. But yeah, just great to be here, and I'm grateful that you invited me back again. And I want to just express my gratitude to you both that you decided to, instead of a smoking jacket, you got me a DS9 hoodie. And I'll tell you, I've been wearing that thing regularly now that the weather has turned a little colder here in Virginia. But Jason got to see it live and in person when we went to lunch. So
that's awesome.
It's basically the same outfit, sweats and a sweatshirt. So I'm good to go here. So
yeah, it's so good to have you back, Jim. So just an interesting point. I was looking at our notes and for the podcast, and depending on how you count, this is either your 5th or your 8th time on Dyson and Mine. So
what's the you have to count the ones where
exactly. Okay, so it's your 5th time joining us for a recording. It's the 8th. This will be the 8th episode because our conversations tend to run long, and we often do, which is a beautiful thing. I've already warned my wife. She's like, "So I'm not going to see you till 10:30." I'm like, "Oh yeah." Yeah. So
is that Jim? He just can't shut up.
I've tried to explain, and I'm like, yeah, it's just easier that way.
Well, the difference between you and me is that my wife will say, "You're not going to come up before 10:30, right?" And I'm like, "No, we don't have Jim this time." And then tonight she's like, "How long going to be down there?" I'm like, "Probably 10:30." And she's like, "Okay." So that's Jason knows that that's the difference. I will say I normally do not like to listen to my own speech or my own talking.
I don't like listening to your talk either.
I know you don't. But I listened to our episode with you on your continuing conversations that I think came out in November.
Yeah.
And I just, as I was listening to it, I realized how fun that conversation was. We hit so many topics. And two, I didn't fully realize until I watched myself talk how much of an accent I have from being here in the Midwest. And Jason, I told Jason,
we talked about this. Yeah.
I overpronounce my, so I can't even look at myself now in the camera because but it was fine. I appreciated, I just wanted to say I appreciated, you having Jason and you and Michael having Jason and I on.
Oh yeah.
It was a reverse. It was just as much of a blast being a guest instead of a host.
Yeah.
And always excited and happy to have you join us because we hit on so many different topics that we don't know where we're going to end up by the end of the night.
Yeah, exactly. And what I thought was funny, Brad, and I don't say this to make you feel bad because I know you weren't able to make it, but when Jason and I had lunch, that lunch was what 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours. It was like it just the conversation continued, and we hit like I don't know 30 or 40 different topics.
It was great.
It was great.
It was so much fun.
It was like if you put a microphone in front of us, it'd just be another one of these shows. Either continuing conversations or this one, right? It's all the same kind of vibe. Which was great. I really enjoyed it.
It probably me being there, not being there, probably saved you about 2 hours of time.
Would have been 2 hours well spent though.
But and thank you. I actually, my wife said you should just drive up for the day and drive back. And maybe in my 20s, I could have like physically been able to handle that. But pushing at my age, it's about a 5.5 hour drive.
It's too much for a turnaround.
I've done it in 4.5 hours, but it was in the summer and it wasn't winter driving, which can always be a little dicey on the interstate that runs between us.
Yeah.
So otherwise I would have.
And back then you didn't have to stop midway to pee.
Yeah, or 3 times. So, and Jason, for those of you that have ever driven between Milwaukee and Minneapolis, you got to stop in Boston, you got to stop in Menominee, you got to stop in Eau Claire, or you got to stop in Hudson, one or the other.
You just don't drink anything and you drive to the other city. But I mean, it's all good.
No, you're gonna have to get gas anyway. So.
Yeah. Well, okay. So to pull us full circle. So yeah, Jim, it was so good to actually see you and meet you in person. I mean, it was like this. It was cool because I remember coming home. My wife was like, "How was it?" I'm like, "Well, it's like seeing a friend," which is really, really cool. But you said something to me like, okay, so let me back up. So Brad and I, obviously, we've wanted to ask you back for, well, honestly, since the last time you were on here, but like, we don't want to burn you out, right? And seriously, but over lunch, you said something to me, something you were just beginning to think about, and hopefully it's okay that we talk about this because I haven't stopped thinking of this. Has been about a month since I saw you. Is it more already?
I think almost exactly.
Yeah, because it was between my 2 trips, so almost exactly a month, and I haven't stopped thinking about this.
Wow.
You seriously, it was just a passing comment. You and I talked a little bit about it then. Because I encouraged you to keep going with something, but you had mentioned being curious about how to cultivate leadership at the RPG table. And I don't know if you've thought about it any further. I have been thinking about that for almost exactly a month. And I haven't gotten any traction on it. I knew we were going to talk to you. I've intentionally not thought about it. And honestly, I don't know what to do with it, but I'm curious if you have any more thoughts about it.
I was just going to say, this is a good organic conversation because I think we'll flesh out as we talk.
Yeah, I think thank you for the reminder, Jason. I know we talked about so much stuff at that lunch, but leadership in Star Trek, of course, is important to me. Your book is perfect, right? I mean, the book hit all my sweet spots. I read it on the plane on the way and then on the way back. And I got highlights all over it and marginalia and all that great stuff. Because I was like, oh yeah. But I don't remember if and I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent, but I promise I'll come back to it. I don't remember if I told you guys, but like way back in the dark ages when I was playing RPGs in the 80s or early 90s. When I got into Star Trek, it just worked out that for my little group, I was the oldest guy in the group. I think I was like 22 or 23 or something. Everybody else was like, 20, 19, 18. I think actually the youngest was 15 because he was the brother of my co-GM. But anyway, bunch of young guys.
Yep.
You know, I was the oldest. I was also the one who was the most knowledgeable about Star Trek. And I was one of the two co-GMs. So I kind of by default became the captain. Right. And I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. I love Cisco. I love Picard. I love Kirk. Like I get that idea. I have the Star Trek knowledge and I have a little bit of maturity, a little bit more maturity than the rest of you, but not really that much. Right. But so kind of like by group fiat, they made me the captain. And in the years that we played together, I discovered that especially the younger guys kind of looked up to me as as a mentor, as a person, right, outside the game, but also inside the game as the captain, and they were playing junior officers, you know, working their way up the ranks. And I was like, this was really, I didn't really appreciate it until much later. And then I looked back on it and reflected, and it was like, wow, we really grew as a group, like individuals, but also as gamers, right? But so like that, I discovered later in life as I became an adult that like I was unintentionally cultivating them as leaders and as people, right? Because like they were becoming more effective role players of department heads, right? Because like one of them was the chief science officer, the other one was the chief engineer, and the other one was the chief medical officer. Yeah. And so just through the role playing, my co-GM and I gave them opportunities to interact with their junior staff officers, right? So it's like, oh, you know, you've got a junior officer coming up to you with a problem. They need to figure out, and it was like, okay, this kid's 15 years old and he's playing the chief science officer, and yet we're giving him a very adult situation of like, you have a junior officer who is coming to you for help. What do you do? And like he role played it really well and worked through it, but it was like just like giving him that opportunity at 15, where like I don't even remember if he was in Boy Scouts or not, so I don't know what kind of like outside extracurricular life he had where he had opportunities to be a leader. But at the game table, he was a leader, and because he was role playing a leader, and he had an opportunity to do it. So I thought that was really cool. But I guess my point though is like we ended that campaign, which was really good. And then we were going to start another campaign, and my co-GM and I had this bright idea of like, you know what, we've got so much experience running Star Trek, playing Star Trek. We know the Star Trek lore inside and out. We had the Okuda Sternbach technical manual memorized, right? Because that thing came out in 91 or whatever, and that was like the Bible for all things Star Trek RPGs, because it was so perfect. Oh yeah. But so we took it upon ourselves to write a how-to role play Star Trek officers document, right? It was like a 10-page Word document. Actually, it wasn't even Word. I think it was
Word Star.
Oh gosh, I can't. Word Perfect, maybe.
Yes, Word there Perfect. It is. Yep.
Yes. And I remember that the only printer we had was my dad's old dot matrix printer that would go, you know, it was on the perforated paper, right? And you had to peel off the perforations on the paper side, and then the paper was perforated too, so you had to pull it apart. It was ridiculous, but
our children will never understand the struggle.
No, they will not. They will not. And like you had to feed the paper just right into the
yes.
work, or it would tear, and we get all off kilter, and then you get lines all over the place. Anyway,
that was
but so I remember writing this stupid pretentious document of like how to role play a Starfleet officer. I think I've still got a copy of it somewhere, actually.
Oh, cool.
I remember reading it. It's like, oh, there's so much leadership stuff in here about like how to be patient with your junior officers and how to manage your schedule and just like how to do this stuff. And so that really resonated with me, Jason, when I was reading your book, because I was like, oh yeah, because you're pulling up all these case studies for all the characters that we see on the show. And that made me reflect, gosh, we learned how to be leaders just by watching Picard and Kirk and Spock and all these other people, because they were interacting with their crew and their junior officers and stuff. And it was like, oh wow, this is amazing that you can do this in a role-playing thing. Yeah. Because there's just not another game that I've ever played where I get that feel. Like, I mean, I've played, you know, plenty of games, so they're a lot of fun, but like Star Trek, and I'm not talking about Star Trek Adventures in particular, but like Star Trek as an RPG thing that I've been doing for 30 odd years now, like consistently, no matter what system we were using, no matter what you know, gameplay we were doing, it was all that basic stuff that we learned from watching Star Trek, is like how to be a good leader, how to be a compassionate, caring person on a ship with other people, and you're relying on them day in and day out, because if one person has a bad day, everybody's dead. right?
Mm-hmm.
Just given the ship. So anyway, I'll stop talking because I want you guys
no, that's
this is
right
this is exactly what we wanted to talk about. And I guess until I read your book, Jason, and now that we've talked about it, it really hit. Watching, especially for me, watching Cisco, especially. Avery Brooks is a phenomenal actor.
Yeah.
He's obviously Shakespearean trained. He just has this aura around him. And you see it with Picard too. You see how they went from not being so much autocratic, but being a distance-based leader to becoming to the point where they were, instead of pushing, I always said they were pushing their people along. Now he was pulling them, and they would be willing to go wherever for him. And just as you're talking, Jim, I just realized, because I didn't move into leadership positions really until like 2007, 2008. And if I go back and really analyze it, there's probably a lot of Cisco and Picard that I had in my brain as I was doing it. So the history of it. And I don't know, Jason, if that's, something that you've kind of pondered as you've worked through the first book. And I know you're working on a second, and without giving anything away.
I mean, to get away from my book, which was, thank you, very flattering, but not the purpose of this conversation. Although if you're listening, you should definitely buy one. But
absolutely,
but like I have to go way back, like I think like being really little before I found myself, intentionally modeling a lot of what I saw in Star Trek. I mean, this speaks more to me than anything, but like Spock, no brainer, right? I don't think I've ever used those two words together before, but for me, like imitating Spock, that was just totally clear. Like, why wouldn't you want to model yourself after his acumen, his logic, whatever? But when TNG came out, and not just Picard, who still is my favorite captain, but Picard, and honestly even more so Data, but also the others. Like by God, by adolescence, by even my tweens, like I don't think there were a lot of days any given week where like I didn't question, okay, how would they do that? I didn't say anything at the time, but I think a lot of us were doing that. Yeah.
Jim, do you see how, in just talking about this and in prior roles, and I don't want to step on toes here, even in your role working on, the IP, the Star Trek IP with Star Trek Adventures as a PM, do you see yourself kind of modeling in some way? Your experiences both as a gamer, what you've seen and read about as a captain, as the captains, in your daily leadership roles that you've been in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think now, of course, the folks at Modiphius would probably disagree. I don't even know if they're listening to the show or not, but I think a project manager, has to be a leader, right? Because you have to win hearts and minds and influence people. Not in, I mean, you could be a dictator and be an ass about it, but it's going to be just makes it a much harder experience, right? But to be compassionate when you need to be compassionate, and but you also need to be firm when you need to be firm. And like if someone's not delivering something when you know you need it, not for you personally, but because the business has dictated deadlines and requirements and expectations, and the project manager is the one steering the ship basically. So basically, I have to be the captain of Star Trek Adventures because that's the role that Modiphius offered me when they gave me the PM spot. And so that was just kind of a natural leadership role that had to be filled, right? Brad, I may not be answering your question quite right.
No, this is perfect.
But like to stretch the analogy even farther, and at the risk of breaking it, like we have a marketing team, we have a graphics team, we have a web store team, we have a freelance team. My art director has his team of freelance writers. I have freelance artists.
Yep.
I have my team of freelance writers and editors and proofreaders. So like they're all department heads of their respective things.
Right.
But like to be a leader, you have to be right? And then we have the leadership, which is the admiralty, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got my fellow PMs who are my fellow captains, and we have our little
Nice.
circle of trust meetings, but I have to interact with all these different levels and all these different department heads, and on rare occasions I have to talk to the individual designers or the individual artists. Not so much that often, but like sometimes there's an interaction there because I know because I'm double-hatted, right? I'm the project manager, but I'm also the line editor. So I have an opportunity to get into the weeds a little bit more than a project manager might, because the project managers technically aren't responsible for the actual sausage making of the product, right? They're not writing the words, they're not editing the words, they're not adding the IP knowledge and know-how over it, but I'm able to do that.
Right.
But I, as a project manager, like I'm the captain of this ship, and I have to be able to interact with all these people and keep things positive and moving forward so that we're accomplishing our goals and hitting our targets and delivering the products that we need to deliver on time and under budget, of course. So I don't know, Brad, I may be rambling at this point. Did that hit on what you were looking for? Or
yeah. I think, and I'll tell you, just in our talks over the past couple of years, you trust the people that you engage with in the various components that are, like you said, making, sausage making, that are putting together the book or books or materials, PDFs and so on. So I think it is, there is a difference between leadership by trying to do everything. There's high possibility of failure, or leadership and trusting the members of your team. And you've always come across to me, and I'm not trying to patronize. It's just, I always look at this as a PM and as a leader. How are other people leading? I'm always analyzing. And I see that you trust the people that you work with, and it allows you to do the work that you should be doing. And it allows those other people to work. And you see that in Trek. I see there's a model there. And I've tried to do that myself with various levels of success or failure. But you hit it right on the head, and you kind of you even went into further detail by just going into talking about the art director and all of that kind of stuff. So I find it interesting, we've talked about this a million times about the role you play there within the line. What I'm curious about, and Jason, interrupt at any point.
I'm getting ready.
Okay, I know you are. When you sit down at the table.
I'm going to interrupt. Sorry, because we're going to go somewhere else, and I want to.
You want to finish?
Don't lose the thought, Brad.
No,
I won't.
No, we're coming right back to that, but because we're about to pivot, and I want to just say something about this, share an observation that hopefully you'll address, Jim. So drifting from leadership maybe, but staying with Trek before we get to being back at the table. You have told us, like these past 2 years, you've told us, and we've also heard of the experience from some of your writers about how you actively try to create opportunities for people where you recognize they have talent, whether they're manifesting that talent or whether it's maybe a little more nascent and you have the wherewithal to bring it out. And I mean, ignoring just what lovely leadership that is, like that is very beautifully Trek. Like I think I had reason yesterday to go back to think about the first episode, right? Strange New Worlds. And toward the very end of it, Pike is talking to La'an right before he offers her a permanent commission aboard Enterprise. And in regard to, defending themselves against the Gorn and who knows what comes, his observation of the Federation and of Starfleet specifically was what sets them apart as an organization is they recognize they're better together. And that seems very Trekkian and very congruent with like what you've talked about, right? I'm ignoring your modesty, but what you've talked about, how over the years in this role as PM, how you've been able to intentionally give people chances when you think they might be really good at this. And your definition, your explanation of that jives with what some of them have told us. And it's like, yeah, that's really working. And obviously we see it in the products, but that's still neat to see because I don't think that's normative yet.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting, Jason. It's funny. I guess I've been so focused on the game that I don't take the time to really sit back and think about, oh gosh, all these writers have been getting these interviews too, and they've been talking to Jason, and they've been talking to Brad, and they've been talking to Michael, and all these
We
other, and
only
they're talking
report
to
the
each
good
other, right?
stuff.
And they're
Yeah.
talking to each other, and it's like, oh shit, I can't, I can't,
Right.
I can't hide anymore. Like I can't do my little secret thing behind the scenes. It's like it's all out in the open now. So it's like, oh damn it, okay,
Well,
deal with it. But no, I think just to touch on something that both of you remarked on is like, yeah, this is very Star Trek, very
Yeah.
Star Trek, and that is absolutely because Star Trek imprinted on me when I was watching the original series reruns, and then into Next Gen and DS9 and everything else.
Yeah.
If I had to reflect, I don't know that we saw like Kirk and Spock necessarily giving other officers opportunities to do something different.
I think we
Although
did.
I could probably go watch and try to
I think
remember
we
and
did.
find some. But I know Picard did a few times, and Riker certainly did. Like I feel like the department heads, we had just the way the shows were structured. Sometimes we saw department heads giving opportunities to their junior officers more frequently than we saw Picard giving opportunities to his officers, only because of their ranks and stuff.
Yep.
I could be wrong again. I'll have to go look at the
Yeah,
canon.
absolutely true.
But yeah, but I think part of that too is just my experience in the corporate world, becoming a leader and working my way up the food chain and becoming a project manager in the day job kind of thing. To where, and plus I do professional development, right? So I do a lot of training for sellers, and what I've discovered over the last, I don't know, 10 years or so is one of the things I'm really passionate about is helping people be better at what they do or to be more successful. And if I can like analyze their job, or if I can kind of like analyze where they are in their career, and if I have a skill set, or if I have just like knowledge that they may not be aware of, and I can impart that to them, and all of a sudden I see the light bulb go off, and all of a sudden they're more successful, I've done my job, right? I mean, that's leadership, but it's also being a subject matter expert and sharing my knowledge, right? But that's what makes a really good leader, I think, is like you can be and I don't want to say it's selfless, but you're not focused
No,
on
it's not.
you're focused on them and helping your team be better. And that's something I'm super passionate about. And absolutely, that's a Star Trek thing that I picked up along
Okay,
the way.
hold on. Episode interjection. I gotta get this in there.
Okay.
Lower Decks, Rutherford, because we're doing this tonight. Rutherford comes to Shaxs after hanging out for a while in security to see if something else fits. And you know what I'm talking about? He comes to Shaxs and says, I'm sorry, Commander, but I think, and I'm paraphrasing, I think this isn't a fit for me, and I need to go back to engineering. And there's this awkward, terrifying pause, and then everyone bursts out in applause, and he's like, "Good for you, baby bear! You found your calling." And like, it's like the most Trek thing ever, and that's what you're talking about.
It's perfect. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I don't know what it is. I don't know. I mean, maturity is part of it, but I think it's just life experiences and just spending time with people, getting to know people, I think is really key. Whether you're any kind of management type of role, if you have direct reports or even like junior peers, who are new to the company or whatever, it's really important. Like, make some time to get to know them, right? As people, like not just in the job, but like, see what they're willing to share. And of course, you have to be vulnerable too and be willing to share stuff and say, look, no, this is okay. This is a safe space. I'm going to be vulnerable and share stuff with you. It's okay if you want to share stuff. And, I'm not going to push you, certainly, but hopefully I'm creating a safe, nurturing environment that you will be willing to share with me. I can learn about you a little bit more. And then if you are, I'm not saying me, but if you are in a position where you can give opportunities to other people, then you start to get a sense of like, oh, and I'll use myself as an example. I'll say, oh, Michael, you are a storyteller. You really like storytelling. You understand what the components of a Star Trek story are and how the beats work and how the scenes work and stuff. Like, as he was starting to work with me on like mission briefs and standalone adventures, like we were starting, and I did a couple interviews with him, I think on like on text or something, right? So I was just getting to know him, but by being very careful about asking questions and getting to know him and really drilling down into and being specific without him necessarily realizing I was kind of drilling down and being specific. I mean, there's an art to that. But I figured out along the way that it's like, I think I have this project I have to do, this captain's log. I think you would be a really good fit to work on it in a larger capacity than just working on a standalone adventure or a chapter of a book or something. And fortunately I was right.
You were
right, because
right.
it came out really
Big time.
good. And sometimes it misses, like sometimes you do things and it doesn't quite work, but sometimes it does work. And we'll be able to talk about this again maybe the next time I'm on the show, if I'm invited back, because there was another writer. I can't talk about it yet because it hasn't happened yet. The book hasn't come out yet. But the next book that's coming out, I had a similar experience with this person, with a person who I said, I think you would be really well suited for this, just given what I've been working on with you on Star Trek Adventures for the last couple of years. And it worked out that he was a good fit for this. And then we went on from there. So I think
Such a tease.
I've lost the thread here. What am I talking about?
No.
So just giving people opportunities is really important to me. And I lucked into this job situation where I'm able to do that. And the fact that it's Star Trek, and the fact that well, actually it may be different now, but for a while there, Modiphius was really the only place where a new writer could get an opportunity to work on Star Trek, right? Like, because the novels, you pretty much need an agent, and you need to go through Simon and Schuster. Except for Star Trek Insider, the magazine, nobody's got the license to do Star Trek short fiction. So there's no opportunity there, unless you're just writing for the love and writing fanfic and posting it online.
Right.
And of course the screenplays, all that stuff, that's all in-house at the studios. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I just fell into this opportunity, like, oh, I can give new writers an opportunity. And of course, 5 years ago, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was just kind of trying to figure it out, and I was trying to emulate the acquisitions editors that I had worked with on the other side. Like, I'm a writer trying to get a job or trying to get a role, and I watched what they did, so that I was learning from them being good leaders. Right. So that's a good mark of a leader too, is that you're constantly learning. You got to be constantly learning to improve yourself, so that you can then improve the people that you're working with, or who are working for you. But just like having worked with a couple of really good editors, I was like, oh, he's doing this really well, or she's doing this really well. I want to do that. And then I applied that to what I was doing with Star Trek Adventures. And it's like, oh, I can give these people opportunities, and I can help them along. I can help them be stronger writers by just being, very targeted comments in their documents and manuscripts and stuff, and just go from there. So I'm going to stop because I think I'm rambling at this point.
No, you're not.
No. You're
Brad,
not.
Bring us back, because I interjected before.
No. You're not. You're not. This is good. I think you've brought up, it's not a lost art, because it's never been an art that's been used in business. It's something that needs to. And what you've talked about is empathy, compassion, and in effect, looking out for the people that work for you or work with you. And a lot of times out in the corporate world, I've seen it. I've experienced it. People don't understand that's not a weakness, that's a strength.
Doing good business is good for business.
Yeah, and I've always been trained in my role. I've always learned in my roles, it's always good to ultimately train your replacement. And a lot of people are very protective of their own IP, what they know.
So, listeners, this will be Brad's final episode. Jim is finally replacing him.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. I mean, Jason talks all the time anyway, so
that's true. I don't need a podcast for that.
For all they know, you could just be mimicking my voice, and I don't actually exist, or I could be AI. Although I have mimicked your voice, Jason. There might be an episode of Dice Mind with AI Jason.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, I know. But no, the idea of, and I don't want to narrow it down, but this idea of looking out for the people that work for you, finding their strengths and enhancing them and upskilling them and leveling them up using a tech game term, whatever it is. You don't see that. And you don't see it. It's because from the top on down, and I'm generalizing, but I firmly believe this to be very generalized. Jason, you teach leadership, so you could tell me in your experience if I'm right or wrong. You just don't see that. People feel like you have to be mind my language, a jackass to be successful, and that's absolutely not the case. Getting to know who your team members are. I always tell people, what's your fuel? What drives you? And that's exactly what you're talking about. You found people on your team that are good writers and you feel like you'd increase their fuel by putting them into these different roles because you think they'll succeed. And that type of leadership is not out there prevalent enough. And let's be honest, it's like I said before, it's not a lost art because it's never been prevalent. It's something that needs to be. And it's been in the, really I've got articles from Harvard Business Review going back to 2016 when they've been trying to push this idea. So even before we get back to the table, I'm hammering on this because I love to hear other people who get it. Too many people don't.
Yeah.
I've worked for people who have, but just don't understand it. You are looking at each individual and seeing what their strengths and where I don't like using the term weaknesses, but their strengths and their areas of improvement where you can upskill.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's, kudos to you for doing that. And again, I'm not trying to be patronizing. I just think people who are listening, if they're leaders, I think it's something worth researching and learning about. It may not be ultimately your path, but I think more, like Jason, you just said, more good business, just treating each other's correctly, empathy and compassion, all the better.
So with that being said, Brad, and all great words. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. No doubt there. I do want to, tell our listeners that, it's not all bread and roses, right? It's not perfect. There are people in the broader team that don't get it. Like you were saying, some people get it, some people don't get it. They don't get that kind of management or leadership. They are leaders in their own respect. They don't get that kind of level. And so there is some I don't want to say resistance. There's just a difference of opinion on how things can be run or should be run in some cases. And of course that makes the challenge interesting because it's not smooth sailing every day, right? I mean, obviously, ideally it would be smooth sailing every day, but it's not always, because there is some resistance and there's some back and forth and things, and that's just natural. And you just have to go with the flow and make it work, and stay professional and all that stuff. But I just wanted to caution, folks that it's not all. I mean, I'm talking up a good game here, and like you guys are being very very kind with your comments, but it's not always perfect, and I wish in some cases it could be, but I mean that's just the way the world is like not everyone's going to go along with it, and you just have to do your best to figure out what makes them tick, like you were saying, Brad. What are they here for, right? Why are you doing what you're doing? Right. And as long as you can kind of like get them on that level, then you can work with them. I think it was Riker who, when Elizabeth Dennehy's character came on, when Shelby came on the show,
that's
Best
right.
of Both Worlds.
It's great.
And they had that real back and forth butting heads. Yeah. And Riker was like, you know what? We don't have to like each other to work well together.
Right.
We can function as Starfleet officers and get the job done, and we don't have to like each other. And she had a big old chip on her shoulder, and she's like, "Well, you're in my way," and because I'm
terrible for you.
Yeah, yeah, it was a great scene. It was good stuff, but that just shows you Riker's leadership,
right?
Where he was like, I acknowledge that we are not going to be besties, but at the same time, I can gently remind you that we don't have to like each other to work.
And
we can still be effective as a team.
I don't know that that's inherently a bad thing.
Yeah.
Right. That when things are easy, when everyone's on the same wavelength, when everyone gets it, that type of agreement breeds or risks breeding complacency.
Yeah.
And we can't remain dynamic as leaders, as thinkers, as creators when everything's going to plan. So there's got to be, and life takes care of that. It's not going to, but there's got to be some pushback.
To hammer on what you were talking about, it's never perfect.
Yeah.
In this environment, you are going to find little microcosms where this exists. As it stands now, I've seen, in all honesty, the closest company I've seen, only because we've interviewed them, is Matthew Sprang at Mongoose. They have a very unique existing type of org structure and culture. what you do, and I don't want to speak for any Modiphius. I don't want to speak for anyone else because I don't know the other IP lines other than the inordinate amounts of money that I spent on all the different products.
True.
What I find is what you're talking about isn't cultural at a good organization. And as such, if someone does this, and I'm being selfish because I've experienced it, people are going to resist to it because they don't understand it. And they think it's self-serving. They don't understand that people can really, truly be altruistic in those leadership roles. No one believes that. So until it becomes, and if it becomes, we start to see an increased, tidal wave of this, you're going to find it, and it's going to be challenging even there. And you even said it yourself. We as leaders are still learning. We never will stop learning. So even as we are doing it now, it's going to be different than when we're doing it 3 to 5 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's bring it back to the table, at least for a moment.
I got to ask a question. So in all this talk about leadership and so on, and with the products that you have, PM'd and line edited and all that, have you thought about these concepts and of leadership and all of that, and found ways? And this is, I know the answer is going to be yes, but I kind of want to flesh it out further. How have you integrated that into the products that you and how have the writers, how have they implemented that? Do you feel have they done a good job? Do you feel like you've done a good job? Honestly, do you feel like you could do better? Do you feel like you're up here? You know what I mean? I guess, how does this culture of leadership at the table, or leadership in general, permeate into what you write and what I would see as an end user opening
That's
up?
a good question.
Yeah. Utopia Planatia, Captain's Log, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a great question.
I would say, personally, from my perspective, I see it and I say yes, but I'm outside looking in.
Right. And I try, and it's not humble to say you're humble, right? But I'm still going to try to say it. Like I try really hard to step out myself and put myself into the fans' shoes, right? Because I spend a lot of time on social media with fans on all the different stuff, and just to say, are they enjoying the books? Are they getting anything out of it? And I think I use that as the primary barometer, is like, what are the fans saying about the game when we're not around? Like, what are their Twitches? What are their YouTube conversations? What are their podcasts saying? What are the little articles that they're posting on blogs saying? Like, what is the meta, I guess, is what some games out there call it. Like, what's the game meta? And overall, like, it's been really positive, and it's interesting to read how people are excited about Captain's Log, or about Utopia Planitia, or about specific components of different books and stuff. And I look at that and I'm like, okay, it sounds like we did a good job, right? It sounds like people are happy with the line. They're happy with the individual products. I can see the joy. Like when there was just a new article about Captain's Log a couple weeks ago on YouTube, and I watched it and I was like, holy cow, this guy like really went all out. He got himself a uniform. He's doing the sound effects. He's playing through the game. I'm like, holy cow! He made this whole production for Captain's Log, and it's like,
wow.
And he would never have done that if that book didn't exist.
Right.
And it's like, wow, we did that. And it's like, so then I reflect and I'm like, okay, what did it take to get that book out there into the world for somebody to pick it up and go do it? Well, somebody had to lead that effort. And that, wait, that was me. And then I had to hire, or not hire, but I had to, bring on freelancers to make that happen. And they had to do their thing, right? Because like I know, and we're speaking specifically of Michael here, right? Because I'm talking about Captain's Log. I asked him to be the lead writer, because at the time I was working on 3 other projects that were high priority, and there was no way I could manage the effort on all 3 of them at the same time. So I was like, look, I need some help, right? Clearly. And I think you've been working with me long enough to know that I think you've got the chops. I can help you with the important stuff, like where you need a little support. Of course, he's already successful in his professional business, right? But I felt like he had what he needed, plus a little guidance from me if necessary. And he got that. But I think watching him be a leader with his little playtest groups and his little sub teams, because I saw that in the manuscripts he was sending me, right? Like he was sending me good stuff, whereas a different writer maybe would have been less polished, maybe would have needed even more of a lift from me to get it to the next level. But I knew, just having seen his stuff, like I knew where he was, and I knew it would just take a little bit of a push out the door to get him to the next level. And that's, I mean, fortunately it worked out. I mean, you're always glad when it works out, and you're like, oh shit, it didn't work out, and then you got to figure something else out. But so there was leadership from me to him, and then from him to his little sub team, and then that all flowed back to me because I saw the manuscript, and I'm like, okay, they delivered the manuscript that I needed. This is the 90% solution that I was hoping it would be. Now I can carry it the rest of the way and continue the leadership from there. So I'm seeing it in the manuscripts I'm getting from my writers. I'm seeing it in the edits and the proofreads I'm getting from the editors and proofreaders. And then like Ariel Aurier, who's our art director, I'm seeing his leadership reflected in the art that he's getting from his artists.
Oh yeah.
Because like I know that he and I work together writing the art briefs. So like he and I are collaborating creatively, figuring out what the art gonna look like, and we go back and forth on it. And then he takes that art brief and he sends it to artists. And there's a whole universe of alchemy that I don't understand, how an art director works with an artist to go from like concept to rough sketches to polished sketches to final piece of art. Like there's a whole leadership thing there that I just don't have visibility into. Like I can probably guess at the basics, right? Because leadership is leadership. But then he sends me sometimes he'll send me a sketch and say, are we on the right track of this? But I'd say probably like 90 times out of 100, he'll send me the near final and say, okay, we're pretty much done with this. Are there any details? Are there any like IP specific details that we're missing? You know, is it a Klingon belt buckle that's wrong? Is it that we got the wrong delta on the chest? Is it, you know, is this the wrong phase or that kind of stuff? But when he sends me these near final pieces of art, I'm like, holy cow, this is amazing, right? This is an awesome piece of art. What in the world did you have to do to make the artist make this? Like, what's that magic sauce? And I don't know. But that goes back to what you were saying earlier. I think it was Brad, might have been you, Jason, where you have to trust your team to do their thing. Like he was hired for a reason because he's a really good artist and he's a really good art director. I don't want to micromanage him because I'm just going to screw it up, right? He's clearly doing things on a level that I will never aspire to because I just don't know enough about art. But I trust him to do the work because I'm seeing the work that he's delivering and his team is delivering. And so clearly there's leadership there, and that leadership component is getting into the books as well. So what the fans are getting are a book that is hopefully, in my opinion anyway, well written, well edited, well proofread, beautiful art. And then there's a whole nother component of the it's not art direction, but it's the design team. It's the people laying out the books. They're creating the look and feel of the book. And then they are somehow integrating the artwork and the writing and the design and bring it all together into a cohesive whole. And that's a piece that I don't really understand either. I mean, I know a little bit about Photoshop and I know a little about InDesign, but like I don't know anything about proper graphic design, right? Like I can read about it and go, okay, I get the concepts.
Right.
And I, you know, as a project manager, I know enough to ask the right questions to it. Like I know the technical stuff enough that I can have a conversation with a technical writer or a technical artist or something and get through it well enough. But I rely on them to do their job because that's what they're there for. And I'm seeing the results of it, right? So anyway, getting around to the fans, hopefully, Brad, the fans, when they pick up the books on some sort of subconscious level, they're seeing the care and the love and the attention to detail that are going into these books. And it's not just Star Trek. It's Acton Cthulhu, it's Dune, it's all the books that Modiphius does, because I think all the project managers really want to make great products. And I think you see it reflected in the books when you pick them up and you're like, holy cow, this is an amazing piece of work, right? So I don't know, does that get it?
Yeah.
I feel like I missed it again. Sorry.
No. I'll give you the other half of the question, because you kind of hit on I go and I read the Game Master's Guide.
Mm-hmm.
I will read, like, you know, not even the Captain's Log so much, but even reading some of the other source books, whether they're the Quadrant source books or the Division source books, whatever the case is.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the team, when it comes to the game mastery,
Yeah.
that leadership game master role. And there's multiple leaders there's the leaders of the players group. There's traditionally department heads. Then there's the game master who drives it, that leader. Do you think there is a Trekkian approach to how you derive the content when it comes to that game master when they're at the table?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
That's not what I was asking originally. This is
no,
this
but actually, I think you were, and I think I misinterpreted it.
No. Actually, I probably didn't speak it right. Then
I'm gonna put that on my shoulders because you don't.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna put it on yours. I think that's on me. But no, I think what you're getting at is like the tone and the overall vibe of the game line. Is that are the writers reflecting that? Is it reflecting it appropriately?
Mm.
And I would say yes, absolutely. I think when what was it? It was 2019 when Chris and Sam said, "Yeah, Jim, we because Sam wanted to move on to other roles in the company, and that would leave a void at project management for Star Trek." And I was like, "Well, I've been doing the work for a couple of years now. I think I'm ready to take that next leap." And they agreed, fortunately. But I think as soon as I got the reins, certainly not that anything was wrong with Star Trek. I mean, it was a really good game system, but I think only because I got into it at the time where we were starting to develop the Klingon core book and the tricorder rules digest.
Yeah.
Because that was a top down tweak of the core book. The Klingon core book was a complete top down revision of the core book. And those two books in particular, especially the Klingon core book, I think it was an opportunity to bring in a slightly fresh perspective into the game line. And because I had spent so much time on social media with the fans, I had a sense of where the game was kind of wanting to go toward more even to buy, even to not buy. I'm losing my words. Nathan Dowdell did a fabulous job of designing a game that was very narrative, right?
Yeah.
Very, very Star Trek, very, very scene and counter focused. Like it feels like Star Trek at the table.
It does.
And after 3 years, I felt like it could go further, right? It could go even further into the narrative. We could do even more with game mastering. And that's why I introduced the mission briefs, right? Like, so instead of trying to do like a whole full-blown module that's mapped out from beginning to end, go higher level and do like broader strokes. Here's this outline that maybe, just start with the first act and see where your players take it. So it was an opportunity to start teaching game masters how to think more Trek. And not to say that the first core book didn't, because I think it did, but I think the first core book, the Starfleet core book, not the Klingon core book, the Starfleet core book, of course, production wise, we had to get that done very quickly in order to get it out for Gen Con. And so it wasn't as cohesive of a whole as I think it could have been. And this is 7 years looking back. It's easy to say that. And certainly nothing against anybody at Modiphius, because we did I think a fabulous job of that book.
That's beautiful.
Nathan won his awards for the system. The book won awards for design, all this stuff. So it was clearly a hit, and it's still super popular even now, right? I mean, it's still we're still getting new fans every day. But I think with the Klingon core book, there was an opportunity to see if we could start pushing the game even more narrative, but not just pushing the game to be more narrative, but also to try to we identified, collectively that okay, we've got this really awesome game, but all the feedback we're getting is people aren't sure how to run it. They're not sure how to play it. They're not sure how to actually get into the Star Trek brain. And I'm certainly not going to blame any other game for doing this, but I think Dungeons and Dragons creates a very particular type of gamer and game master and a certain set of expectations.
Right.
And then when they go to a different game, they're like, okay, in fact, I see this on social media all the time. I want to try out Star Trek Adventures. I've only ever played D&D 5th edition. Am I going to be okay? Am I going to be able to play this game without any problems or whatever?
Yep.
And not unfortunately, but just the reality is Star Trek Adventures is a very, very different game than D&D 5e. They're not, neither of them is a bad game. They're both great games. But they're different. They're so different. And it's tricky to try to teach people that. And I think we identified that even 4 years ago, it was hard to teach them. So we did the Klingon core book, we did the tricorder set, and then immediately after that, we started working on the Player's Guide and the Game Master Guide. And those two books especially I saw those. I was like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to get all my Star Trek stuff, game mastering, leadership, all that stuff out of my head and onto the page into these two books that are going to help game masters and players be even more effective and even more Star Trekky. And it was fortunate that I found a cadre of writers who were vibing on the
Right.
same level as me for the most part. Like we
Right.
had some differences of opinion, and that's what made us stronger as a team, I think. Like you were saying, Brad and Jason, you were saying like, it's never going to be perfect. You got to have that little bit of friction to
Yep.
get that extra
You have
innovation
to.
going, right? And so, Al and Michael and John and all the other writers, we put our heads together. We banged out the outlines for those two books. But like tonally, like I put in the outline, this is where I want to go. This is where I think the game needs to go.
Right.
Here's the
Okay.
direction we should be focusing on in terms of like teaching people the game, not just teaching the game, but like teaching them Star Trek to some extent too, right?
Right.
Because there's a whole new generation of people who don't know anything about Star Trek other than like Discovery and Picard at the
Yep.
time anyway.
Yep.
They haven't watched the 55 years worth of Star Trek and can't
Not yet.
necessarily blame them because it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But we wanted to try to take away the fear that people had of like, oh, I want to do Star Trek, but there's 55 years of Star Trek. I can't absorb that in a week in order to go get to the game table and play. I just want to play with my friends. And so like all that leadership stuff that I've developed, all the knowledge and lore of being a game master for Star Trek, all that went into those books. Fortunately, the writers were on the same vibe as me. All their drafts reflected that too. So it was fairly easy to edit because like it was most of the content was already there, and then I could just tweak it and clean it up and present it. So that worked out great. And I think that's all in the book. Like all the love we have for Star Trek, all the stuff we've learned as game masters and storytellers over the years imbued itself into those books. It couldn't have happened if we didn't have that our respective experiences being game masters, being storytellers, being specifically though being Star Trek storytellers and Star Trek gamers and Star Trek game masters. And hopefully we were able to present it in such a way that it makes it easier for people to grok the game and go on from there. So Brad, I fear I may be
no, you hit it. You hit it right on the head.
No, this is
Okay.
so okay. So as I mean, right on the head. So as a tiny example of like an outcome of just how much this has all evolved in the game line and what you guys have. So I don't think I said anything. I don't think I said anything about this when I saw you for lunch, but I'm looking at the date here, toward the end of November. So this has been a while. It's just been sitting on my desk. Toward the end of November, I just needed some. I just need in fact I think it was like Thanksgiving weekend. So I knew I had some time coming. I'd been kind of jonesing for some real Trek. I think Brad knows where this is going. So I didn't say anything to anyone. And I had like a chunk of like a whole morning or whatever to myself at the house. Right? Like I had the time, I had the space, no work I had to do. I decided I want to create a starbase in STA in case we ever want to play. I thought maybe a ship, but I'm like, no. I want to create like I done this in Star Wars in Edge of the Empire for my daughters and nephews and niece several years ago during that moment.
We already have a ship.
We already have a ship, that's right. And so I thought I want to do this and I want to better learn the mechanics of Star Trek Adventures. And because we've been learning, we've been studying, and obviously loving it, but I wanted to do something a little different and really get into it where I had to really pay attention because Brad and I, excuse me, as of yet, we just hadn't, we hadn't had time to play. And I thought, forget this, I'm gonna try this. So to your point, Jim, with all you just said, I was able to use Utopia Planitia with just a little bit of help from the core rule book. And basically in one sitting, I just went, I did all the roles, which I love. I did all the roles. I just went through the steps as guided in Utopia Planitia, and I created a base. And then I took a few days to find some visuals and to flesh out the story behind it, the specifics behind it, right? I kept thinking of our chat with Thomas Moroni before he like just became so popular, and like what he told us when we chatted with him about like his process for like thinking through these ships, and it's like, whoa, you know. And
Yeah.
so I just went through Utopia Planitia, and I did it, and it was so smooth. And I think
Mhm.
so, you know, to your point, I mean, that's just a tiny singular example, but the fact that you guys are doing what you're doing, and something like creating a base, a space station. I mean, all of it, because let's face it, like character creation in STA is a bit challenging. Thank God for the website, right? Which is actually way fun. But then a few iterations later, to be able to create essentially an entire environment for stories.
Mhm.
That kind of blew me away. I mean, I had so much fun over 2 or 3 days fleshing out the narrative behind it
Yeah.
because the mechanics were just smooth.
Right.
I mean, you guys are delivering.
I'm just gonna disagree only on one point is that because I've read through Jason knows this, so many different systems, and there's really cool ways to do session zero character creation.
Yeah, yeah.
The more I saw, and again, I'm not knocking any other products.
Nope.
I've got Infinity, John Carter, and Homeworld sitting on my desk.
He's been spending a lot of money lately, Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I haven't really, but yes, I have.
Yeah. Yeah.
But point being is that I have found I don't look at complexity of character creation. I look at the funness factor
Yeah.
of it. And I find that the STA, if you're in a Star Trek mind, or even if you're not, it's such a different experience than rolling a 5e character
Right.
or anything else. Right. So that's the only way I would disagree, Chase, is.
Oh yeah, totally. But yeah, my point though, just I think what you're talking about, Jim, like this stuff is clearly becoming evident, like for us as end users, because like to be able to go through at this point and like there's just you can just do it. Right? I was like, how far am I even gonna get? And like within a couple hours, it's like, oh my God, I've totally statted this out, and I can see it, and I can see how this thing would work and play. I mean, that's what I love about these games.
Yeah, and I think you know that's if I bring it into if I bring in the leadership
Yeah.
theme a little bit, that's where as a leader I was learning from my writers, right? Because like Aaron Paulier and Al Spader especially are really big fans of mechanics and random tables and that kind of stuff. And I'm not quite as big of a fan of random tables. I never quite did that thing when I was running D&D back in the day.
No.
I was never really into like random encounters and stuff. I was more story and intentional about like, well, I don't want you to meet some random mooks. I want you to meet these mooks that are going to be related to my story down the road. But working with them over a couple of products and then moving toward Utopia Planitia, I was like, clearly there's an opportunity here that we can do a full-blown toolkit, like how to build your starship, how to build a small craft, how to build a space station. And Aaron, you know, of course, went off and running with that. And Al had some stuff too to drop in for random tables. And because like Aaron, I mean, I know I think you talked to him, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he was great.
He lives and breathes starships. And like he's got his own systems mapped out in his brain about how to do the math and how to build a thing. And I was like, okay, well, here's your opportunity to codify it. Let's make it all official now and do it. And so he did it, and fortunately, we were able to make it fairly clear, step by step. Here's how to do it. Think about this. Think about that. Think about that. I think looking back, I mean, it's only been what 2 years since that book came out. There was two wishes I had. I wish we had been able to put in some flow charts to make it even easier to understand the steps of doing it. I think we learned that lesson with Captain's Log, where we put in more procedural flow charts on how to actually do stuff. I wish we had done that with Utopia Planitia, just to make it a little bit more clear. I mean, I think the steps and the bullet points in there are pretty good, but I think if we had maybe 3 more months of development time, we could have added that extra bit of polish, right? So that's the one thing I wish we had done. The second thing, absolutely, Jason, I wish we had more time with Thomas to really dig into here's what you need to think about this starship. Like, what is its function? What does it do aesthetically? What does it look like? Because like the Federation, like the Federation has found that beautiful balance between form and function.
Right.
Like the ships are aesthetically pretty, but they also serve a purpose. And I wish we could have gone into a little bit more thought on like oh, you and your group are going to build a starship. Well, here's some things to think about here. Yeah, and not so much like mechanically, what weapons
Yeah,
does it have, what
exactly.
that kind of stuff,
Right.
but like, what do you, is it an inviting space frame shape and feel? Is it long and flowing and gliding through
Hmm.
space, or is it more like a brick and it's just going to like push its way through space and be like like the Sulaco, right? Just kind of like shouldering its way through space, imposing its will upon whatever planet it happens to become in orbit, or is it going to be like the Enterprise D, where it's just kind of like gliding into, because it's got such pretty smooth lines, right? And it's like it's gliding through space as opposed to like pushing its way through. So I wish we'd been able to put more of that into Utopia Planitia to get into the starship designer brain, but other than Aaron, we didn't really have a starship designer. So I wish I
There
had
aren't
the,
many who do
yeah,
that professionally.
right. I wish that I mean, if wishes were horses, right? But the relationship we had with Thomas wasn't as mature then as it is now. So
Yeah, of course.
like right now, if I talked to Thomas, he'd write that stuff all day long. It would be awesome. But 3 years ago when we were developing the book, it just wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah.
And it didn't occur to me, of course, until
Yeah. Of course.
2020
Yeah.
hindsight, right? But those are the two wishes I had for that. But I'm grateful
That's
to hear
cool.
your feedback, and I'm so thrilled to hear that you had fun, creating a space station. Because I know that
Oh, so fun.
we used Utopia Planitia, or at least I did, as the launching point for Captain's Log, right? Because like we saw all the things we were doing. It's like,
Right.
well, we used
Yeah,
the
it
player's guide,
shows.
we used the player's guide and the game master guide to teach people how to play the game more better. We used Utopia Planitia to show them how to build stuff
Hmm.
effectively. Why don't we take that to the next level now and do Captain's Log, where we're encouraging people to just go create their own stories and plot points and storylines and all this stuff. And we would just, it was just an evolution, right? And we took it to the next step. And
Hmm.
and now that story you just told us, Jason, about you getting to sit down with the book and just build a space station.
Yeah.
That's the same kind of story we've been hearing from people using Captain's Log as a
Yes.
tool to
Mhm.
unlock their creativity and go create a character and then go tell amazing Star Trek stories. And that is the most exciting and humbling thing that I've ever done creatively, is like to be able to make that thing and to see people doing stuff with it. There's I don't know. You're gonna have to call me on this. I don't know. And of course, only because I'm in the moment and we're talking. I don't know of another creative medium offhand where you can create a thing
Hmm.
and give it to somebody,
Hmm.
and then they can then take it and go be, oh, you know what, I'm wrong, you know what, and I should have known this because I'm a lifelong fan of
I
Lego, the
knew you were going there.
people that
Nice.
make
Yes.
There it
Lego.
is.
Yeah.
There it
This
is.
is what they're doing, right? Because they make the
Yeah.
sets, they
Yeah.
make the pieces, they design the pieces, they engineer all the different pieces, and then they put them into sets, or they put them into random bulk bags or packages or whatever, and then they push all that stuff out to the world, and then they get to see what people do with it, right? And I would love to I would love to talk to somebody from Lego someday and say, all that cool stuff that you make, all those random bits and pieces, seeing the end result, like seeing all the fans around the world making amazing creations, like how does that make you feel?
Yeah. It's
Just
got
like
to be pretty
walk me
cool.
through it. Like, is it cool? Is it like, what is it? I don't know. But like a musician makes beautiful music, but I can't say necessarily, of course I'm not a musician, but like, does another musician listen to their stuff and say, oh, I can take that and I can go do this and build on it or change it or make it different? It feels different than me creating a toolkit and saying, take this toolkit and go do something amazing with
Well,
it.
I think but that's the second time now you mentioned the term toolkit, and
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm automatically going back to the Fate toolkits.
Yeah.
Like the Fate Space toolkit is
Hmm.
just so much fun to read, right? Because it just gets the mind going. But I think
Right.
that's the operative word here, because that's what something like Captain's Log is. It's like you can listen to beautiful music. If you're a musician, I guess you can riff off of that, but it's not a toolkit,
Yeah.
right? Whereas Captain's Log, yeah, I will say that. I mean, you know what the two of us think about Captain's Log. But man, but I think that book specifically has helped me get more into Star Trek Adventures and more readily than anything that came before. And honestly, it's helped me get more into Trek again. Because like you mentioned, sorry, Brett, you mentioned random tables. I've never been a random table person. I mean, we back in the start of the podcast, we talked to some people who like specialize in creating random tables, super creative stuff. I never much cared for them until Captain's Log. And then it was like, these are so much fun. Like, I get it now.
Yeah.
But and again, I know we don't want to focus on one product, but I think the point of Captain's Log is I know how it's marketed, but I also know we talked about it, and really it is
Here comes the literature.
It is creating literature.
Yeah, it is. It is.
There's not another product that I played a lot of great solo games. And I've read a lot of great solo games. And even Michael was talking about this when we had him on here, where he would log the story as he would play with his nieces and nephews, and they wanted to go and read it afterwards.
Yeah, that's cool.
But that is a creative writing. I'm going to go back toolkit versus almost it. Yes, you can play solo. It is a solo game.
Yeah.
But the way you're playing it, you're in effect writing, and you don't even necessarily realize it until you've gotten through, a mission. So I think it's a different type of product, but there's also a leadership component to it, just because you're driving your own story. It potentially could drive people to the point where, wow, it'd be fun if I could play with more people. You are creating an effect early GMs because you're giving them a subset toolkit, a streamlined mechanic and so
but
on.
also complementarily with the GM guide and the player's guide, right? And we've talked about this, the three of us, before, but so they're staying away from the mechanics, immersing in the narrative. Those are totally toolkits as well. I mean, they're written not as a history, but as a guide, like, think about this. This is how it works. And I mean, they're not the only products from the line, obviously, but yeah, the toolkit mentality we just love.
Yeah,
because it works. It works as literature. It works as game playing. It works as narrative.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. And you're right, that's also a leadership component, because that's another thing that I thought was really important working on the Klingon. Well, the Klingon book. Yeah, there's some leadership stuff in the Klingon book, because I introduced the mission briefs, and that was my like tentative starting point of like, I want to see if we can get game masters thinking in different ways to get away from just the module adventure component element, to be like, you have an opportunity to think more creatively and more broadly, and get into the Star Trek mindset of thinking in scenes, thinking in acts. And this is where I credit the making of DS9. I know we've talked about it before, but the Judy and Garfield
thanks to you.
That book is so good, and like it goes from A to Z. Here's how to create a series. Here's how to create a script. Here's how to create characters. Here's how to think in that mode, where you are building a series and an episode in a different way. I mean, it's related certainly to building an RPG, but it's specifically Star Trek, and it's even we're working on trying to get groups away from the idea of the game master has to create the campaign and then invite players in. I've been encouraging them to like, no, don't do that. Let them decide what ship they want to be on. Work with them and have that session 0. What era excites them to play in? Like maybe you've got 2 players who want to play next gen. Maybe 3 of them want to play original series. Get the 5 of you together and just talk about it. Don't have the game master just say, I want to run a next gen era game on a Galaxy class starship, and I want to do this, and this, because some of your players may not be excited by that. But if you get a group together and you talk about it and you communicate, and you have that facilitated discussion in a way, as complex or as simple as you want to get it, it just depends on where you want to go with it. You could get everybody bought in to something even cooler than what you by yourself could have imagined, right? And I think that's a sign of a leader too, is right to say, I don't have all the answers. We're not going my way or the highway. It's like, we're going to get together and we're going to create something better than any one of us, right? Because we're all, and I think that's absolutely something I learned from Star Trek, from even when I was a dumb snot-nosed kid who didn't know any better, right? Like, clearly the crew was stronger together, because if they got separated, then the beast on the planet was killing them, and then they were picking up bodies or picking up the styrofoam polygons, and then they got turned into polygons or whatever, right? But like I think and this is a tangent, but Galileo 7 was a great episode. I mean, I was like what 9 or 10 or something when I watched it, because that was Spock really struggling as a leader, and like 3 of his away team got killed, right? And then by the end of the episode, he learned, like he kind of figured it out, right? By at the very end in 45 minutes. But it was like, oh man, if you're not working together, like there are consequences, right? So if you can work together and figure things out, then you can all be more effective as a team. But anyway, so I'm rambling again, of course, but
praise log.
I think the toolkit mentality absolutely is something I tried to infuse from the very beginning when I took over.
It shows.
And fortunately, the writers that kept coming back got it right. Because they were in the same mindset. We want to make toolkits. We want to make toolkits, even if we're doing a book like the Discovery Campaign Guide, right, which is focused on a very specific period of time, very specific couple seasons of Discovery. And we wanted to put the lore in there to say, okay, well, here's what's happening in this time frame, and here's what's happening in this time frame. But it wasn't enough to do that. I wanted to go in there and say, okay, now we have to tell players and game masters, what can I do with this? What cool things can I do with this period of time, this setting, and do amazing things with it? So, I mean, even then, so like if you look at Utopia Planitia is more of a toolkit than any of the other books, because just by its nature, it's space frames and how to build ships, right?
Right.
But still, I still found ways to, or Michael and Al and the other writers still found ways to put in cool stuff like random tables and other things, right?
But also the narrative for each ship and station are
that's
so
all
crucial. Yeah. Okay.
I love that stuff.
Speaking of toolkits and future products. Okay, 2 unsolicited requests. We don't know anything. We're not asking anything.
Okay.
I do not take responsibility.
No, these are requests. These are requests. I've had this request from the beginning. First, 25th century source book. I can't help. I mean, I want more. I want 25th, because if we can read your stuff from the 25th century, because we're not getting any more right now from Trek, that means we can get more into the 25th century. So, I don't know. I'm not asking. If there's one coming, that would be great, because then we can play in it. And if there's not, that might be great too, because it implies that Viacom CBS hasn't released that license, which says maybe they are thinking about legacy, which would make me even happier. And then you guys should write a writing guide. I would pay any amount of money for an STA writing guide, like the DS9 one, but focused on how to write. I mean, you guys are masters at this, right? Every conversation with you.
Well, are you asking about how to write?
Yeah.
Or how to write?
Well, I'm not sure there's a strong separation there, but like you had recommended a couple years ago now, the DS9 writing guide, and that was a really cool read. Like that's in my writing section on my shelf now.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
That really just opened my eyes to a number of things. Brad and I had lots of chats about that. But how cool would it be, rhetorical question, to have something like a Star Trek Adventures writing guide? I don't mean to become a writer on the line. I don't care about that. I mean like how to write for like Trek and or RPGs, right? Those like so much of what you're doing with the line, it's not mutually exclusive. One informs the other. Like I would talk about Star Trek as lit, RPGs as lit. I think a lot of people would love to get into that, and then like write fanfic or write their own homebrews or write their adventures, or just read it.
Jason, I'm curious. I want to drill into that a little bit. Well, first I'll say, so 25th century is tricky because we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know if legacy is going to be a thing or not.
Fingers
but
crossed.
Even if it is, like I think the end of Picard, depending on where you fall in the fandom, right? Like apparently they've kind of resolved the Borg question, right? So presumably the end of Picard season 3 has taken care of the Borg. We don't know. Maybe it's maybe not. But my guess is that it's been put to bed.
Yeah.
The way that season ended, like it is so wide open.
So
like that is a great launching point for any number of campaigns.
Right.
And I would be leery. I think what we would do is we would present everything we know up until what 2402 and say, okay, well, here's how season 3 of Picard ended.
Yeah.
Here's a
You
bunch
just
of bullet
can't go
points.
past that.
Here's a bunch of bullet points that you can think about where you want to go from there. And then I would just leave it up to the players and the game masters to say, okay, here's what we know. Because like historically, we're trying not to create new stuff whole cloth because we don't want to step on anybody's toes, especially the game masters and the players. So I think we would present it that way and say, okay, now go do your thing. And I mean, gosh, there's so much you could do with it, right? You could take Shackleton Expanse and just do a whole 25th century campaign on the Shackleton.
Right.
Take any of the novels and like spin them into a story. If you are familiar with Star Trek Online, or Star Trek Online, you could take all their storylines because their storylines are going into the early to mid 25th century, and we've given you enough tools in Utopia Planitia where you can play the Odyssey, you can play some of the new the newer ship classes that we saw in Picard into the 25th century. So I think even though they're not all in one place, I think all the pieces are there. And this is back to my Lego analogy, right? All the pieces are there. You just need to kind of pull them together and then go forward with the 25th century.
Totally true.
Before we go back to the writing one, because now I'm intrigued by it. General question, because I'd mentioned in the past, all lines, especially STA, does a really good job of sending out errata and updates. Just generally speaking, have you ever thought about doing, second editions of certain books? I'm not asking anything specific. Is that something in your own culture, in your own, mind space, that there is a chance at some point to do a revised book of A or a revised book of B? Generally speaking, I'm not asking specifically. It's just a lot of times people don't like that. A lot of times people do.
The very earliest books have been out just long enough. Maybe.
Well, I don't even want to say that, because if you listen to Jim, you can hear about, like you said, hindsight's 2020. Would you ever want to do something like that? Or like you did with Captain's Log, you provided the lower decks as a supplemental. So I printed it off and put it in the book, so I know I have it available. So that's another way to do it. Cool. Just a general question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Brad. I think the interesting thing about Star Trek, and not specifically Star Trek Adventures, but like Star Trek as a whole, over the last 58 years or whatever, like it's been remarkably consistent, right? Like from Star Trek to Next Gen to DS9, all the way out to Discovery and Prodigy and stuff. Like the principles and the overall vibe and the overall lore and stuff hasn't changed. I mean, it's evolved, right? But it's been consistent, like Starfleet to Starfleet to Starfleet, and all that stuff. So like, and I'm sitting here. I know your listeners can't see the video, but I'm looking at my books over here, and I'm like, the weird thing about the line is like most of this stuff is still in print, right? Because we reprint the stuff as the stock goes down and as it's financially makes sense to do so. Like unfortunately, the Klingon core book is 400 pages, and it ain't cheap to reprint because printing costs have just gotten ridiculous. But as
an aside, I've seen an increase out on some of the resale sites. An increase in the used prices of those. So there must be stock must be getting thin or something like that. I have it from when it launched. But it was just you mentioned Klingon. I just found it doing some research today. It was
right. Yeah. So the stock levels are all over the place on all these different books. But when they go out of print, we have been reprinting them when it strategically makes sense to do so. And of course, the PDFs are still available, so you can always get it on PDF. But so far, like, I mean, sure, I'd go back and do them differently in some cases, or I might add more detail to them. I think there was one or two books that I wasn't responsible for, so they were like before me being the project manager, that maybe I might have done differently if I was the project manager at the time. But I'm not gonna poop on the previous project manager because they did their thing and I was doing my thing. And I think I am generally allergic to just regurgitating information for the sake of doing it, because there's still mean, gosh, I mean, Star Trek, there's still huge swaths of Star Trek stuff that we haven't even touched yet, really, or just mildly alluded to, that are still on my developmental wish list that we haven't even gotten to yet. And unless the directive came from on high to, Jim, we want you to redo the command source book. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's someone telling me, that's giving me direction to go do something, right? But I would much rather do something new and different, or at least related, and move the line forward than to go back and say, oh, I think we should redo the Delta Quadrant source book. Maybe we didn't do enough on the Borg in there, and let's go do more of that. Or maybe I'm just looking at the examples here. I mean, like Lower Decks is a good example, right? Like that book covered the first 2 seasons and a little teeny tiny bit of season 3, because we were ending the development on it just as season 3 was starting. There was an opportunity to kind of like allude to what happened to Freeman in between season 2 and season 3, so we were able to fit that in, right?
Nice.
But now that Lower Decks is now heading into season 5, there's 2.5, 3 more seasons worth of stuff that we could do something with. It's like, well, what, do we revise the book that's already out, or do we do something new? Right. And so I would much rather do something new than to go back, rehash what we've already done, and just like tack onto it, because that feels kind of
it creates overlap. If I have the original book and then I go and buy a revised book, I'm going to have some content that overlaps, and that's fine. It's just, for me personally, I like to see the additional. You have already, based off of the Game Master Guide and the Player's Guide, have brought in material that maybe you would have integrated in earlier, and even in Utopia, you've broadened the product by allowing for frames. So again, I'm not trying to patronize. It's fascinating to me, just based off of every product that comes out drives the line forward. And I think that might be in some ways cultural, because I'm seeing it with Dune. Especially because that's kind of the other game that I follow a lot of. And some of the product lines have kind of matured where they're just kind of like, okay, we're static. And nothing new is immediately coming out. It's just STA is so organic right now. Star Trek is so organic.
Well, because I mean, there's still wonderful Star Trek coming out. I mean, we're in a bit of a dry spell right now as you record, but like the dry spell right now is just a few months, right? Until there's a season of something, and that's just. I mean, I give you guys all credit. Like you've talked in the past, Jim, about just the timeline required to get these projects completed from start to finish. And of course, that piggybacks on a totally different timeline that you can't control from the shows themselves. And so clearly, I mean, there's no way to keep up with creative content that keeps coming out, and where you don't really know when it's going to be released, when it's going to be announced, where they're going to go with it. I would think it's a good problem to have.
Jason, since Jason was driving spoilers, when we're done with this, I want to ask a question going back to leadership.
What's the spoiler?
No, you're trying to get spoilers, and
no, that's not my thing. I want to see a writing guide.
I know what you're doing. You're trying to get spoilers.
Yeah, no, I love Picard, so I love Picard, so I just as soon as I got into STA, I'm like, okay, it's time for a Picard book. I mean, like there'd been one season and I was already there. But Jim, you're totally right. Like it's out there. It's just a matter of piecing it together, because that stuff exists. But what you're saying tonight, I mean, it does make me think like something like a writing guide would just be cool. I mean, I know that's pretty nerdy and in the weeds, but I think there are more and more people who would really read that.
Modiphius came out with the Solo Player's Guide, which is a really good book for people that want to do. So there's stuff out there that isn't necessarily line based, but can be used across the lines. Although Captain's Log is really focused that effort. I think, and let me try to quickly summarize. From a leadership perspective, I have found, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, that the material is written, the way you and your team operates from this leadership plus collaboration, and for many collaborations a swear word, which I think is ridiculous. The material that we have in our hands now, Player's Guide, Game Master's Guide, all the different source books, all the different division books, quadrant books, they are provided in a way that makes it accessible and usable for not only the player, but to help build the GM toolkit,
Yeah.
And allow them to learn to be that GM. And I think the products kind of in their own way make it easier, I think, than in other product lines, no disrespect to them, become GM or learn to be GM. Because let's be honest, you need GMs to play, and people have to take that leap,
Right.
and people are afraid to.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, go try to be a GM right now or a DM in Pathfinder. Love the game. I don't have enough hours in the day to figure it out.
Yeah.
So
a couple thoughts. And we're gonna go outside the timeline a little bit because you guys have brought up so much great stuff.
Yeah.
First, a non sequitur. You know that meme that's out there of the guy in front of the cork board, and the cork board has all the different strings kind of connecting to each other in different ways, and he looks really frazzled, right? And he's like he's trying to connect the dots and tell the story, but there's stuff all over the place. That's how I feel when we have these conversations, because this is all such great information. And like, oh, Brad made a great point, I want to go back to that. Oh, and Jason just made a great point, I want to go back to that. No, I want to bring this in. It's like it's all over the place, and I love it. I love this dynamic feel. So I just wanted to say I wish I had a way to mentally put that map together in my head so that I can see all the dots that are connecting, so that I can actually reflect on the things that you guys are talking about. So I'll throw that out there. My question was for Jason. Like you're saying you want a writing guide, and I'm curious, like what isn't in Captain's Log from a like how to write Star Trek perspective that isn't meeting your need to where you're saying, God, I wish I wish we had a writing guide for writing Star Trek. Like I know that Michael and I really tried to put a lot of that advice into Captain's Log. So I'm curious, it's not putting you on the spot, hopefully.
Yeah,
but
no.
like clearly you have a hunger for something that isn't being provided to you. So like I'm just curious where we missed the mark.
Let's keep it rated G with Jim's comment there. Let's keep it rated G.
Yeah, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
It's Trek. It's always like, or a soft PG-13. Maybe PG-14. No, nothing. I mean, my God, is it meeting the need? What we think of that? I certainly think the world of that guide. I don't know that I have anything specific in mind, Jim, or even thinking of anything specific. I never actually thought about that until like 20 minutes ago, and it just kind of came to me like, oh, that would be interesting. Let me see if I can. So it's not thought through at all. I was even thinking. Again, this is probably
are you talking about like writing?
Yeah, I think this would it's probably way too broad really for like a game line, but like with the DS9 writing guide that you introduced us to, like it takes so like how that one takes you into like the world of what it's like to basically write, pitch, all that stuff, this show, which is super far out from my work and my headspace.
Right.
But reading it was still really intriguing and informative. And actually after that, I started a little bit changing the way I would give feedback on papers and like student papers and stuff like that. Like even dumb little things, like instead of like saying I'm sending you a bunch of feedback or a bunch of comments, dumb little things like I sent you a bunch of notes, right? But like just a little bit of mindset shift for me in terms of how I started thinking about that. So, because I don't do anything fiction. But it was interesting. And so I don't know, as you were talking, it was like had this image like of an SGA writer's guide where like it like walks you through kind of akin of this is it is this is how to think about these things like bigger picture. Like I mean Captain's Log does so well like for stuff at the table, and I think because we had just come off of Brad mentioning RPG is lit again. I guess I was thinking almost more like abstract, um not for like writing the games but maybe like what's the process for like for those who like want to write adventures, like the bigger things.
I think
I don't know.
I think what you can do is maybe it's not even a book. Maybe it's just a cool blog article.
I was just gonna say it probably is best served as a blog. Yeah.
Where you say, okay, you've taken it this far in writing your Star Trek adventure using Captain's Log. are there additional steps where you can take it and just truly turn it into fan fiction? Is that, I'm just wondering if
I don't know. You're both giving that question/comment way more credit and merit than was worth. I mean, it was just an off the cuff remark like this would be fun.
I mean,
But I like where it's going.
I could see there being a cool, just an art sometime down the road. Again, I don't like talking about this stuff because we're not here to wish product, but taking what we've written out as a story or a campaign or an episode in Captain's Log, how do you take that one step further and turn it, format it, do whatever you need to do to make it fan fiction? Is that what you're saying?
Or honestly, even like something that I ponder. So like the space station I created, like I created it and then I told Brad, and the in a week or so, I'm going to GM a sandbox session for Brad and Aaron. And we're going to use it, and it's just going to be, there'll be some roles, but it's really just like all narrative so that we can all feel immersed in Star Trek, right? But so like I get that, and I can come up, for example, with like an adventure, right? Whatever. But I still think it's truly like intimidating. I really respect these people who can like map out like an actual, I don't know what to call it, like an actual adventure arc, right? Like you go back to Pathfinder, like an AP. Okay, that's a little grandiose, but you know what I'm saying. I'm not saying we should write 6 books, but like how do you do that? Of course, that's really just writing fiction, I guess. But it's all totally foreign to me, and so I just find it intriguing. Again, you're really both giving this idea way more credit than it's worth.
Well, I'm just trying to flesh out what you're
again, you're fleshing way beyond the bone here. I mean, there wasn't anything there. I still regularly bring Captain's Log upstairs, like Brad does, just to read sections of it.
Well, I don't bring it upstairs. I got a copy downstairs and a copy upstairs. So right. I got my.
Sorry, some of us work in the public sector and only have one.
Well, no. That's okay. This was before the job change and everything like that. I was much more irresponsible than I am now.
True.
But no, I like reading that book.
Oh, so much.
Like it is its own. Because it's in many ways kind of like DS9. Here's how you write a story, a Star Trek story. I don't know if Jason, it was kind of like, okay, take it the final step, and here's how you've created your own fan fiction. But there's also probably a bit of hoops you'd probably have to go through to do that, because like you said, there's certain ways that you can produce fan fiction, certain ways that you can't from a license.
And again, I wasn't thinking fan fiction, but you guys, as you, Jim, and Michael and Al, I mean that whole team you have and are comprising, you guys are just so masterful at writing these stories, and whether they're in the briefings, which are just super great. Like you, I think like the briefings are kind of what got the two of us into STA, because they were so like wanting to play because they were so accessible. But whether it's the briefings or the missions or the the big, like the Shackleton, like it's just, I think you're also good at that. It would be cool like to learn, just to like bring that upstairs and read like, oh, so this is how they go through the creative process. Like, because when I read stuff like that, like when I read Captain's Log, like, or any of these others, it's like, okay, I feel like more capable a little bit now of writing the stuff that I write, like professionally, right? Because it pushes the boundaries of what I know. Of course, that's Star Trek. That's the whole point of Star Trek, of pushing the boundaries of what we know. So talk about beating a dead horse.
I think I get where you're going. Jason, if you are curious about storytelling and you have time, I would highly recommend you grab Robert McKee's story. This is a great book. I'll hold it up so you have time to write it down. And go check out Amazon. Robert McKee's story. He is a screenwriter, but the principles that he talks about in this book are applicable to literally any type of writing, whether it's fiction or gaming or whatever. And I think I love your idea of taking all the principles of good storytelling and good screenwriting, because of course Star Trek is a television show, right? And a movie. It's it's all screenplays at the end of the day, right?
Right.
But putting that stuff and then putting the Star Trek lens on it, and not just the Star Trek lens, but also a gaming lens, right, on top of
Right.
it,
Yeah.
would be really cool. I think that would transcend Star Trek Adventures.
Yeah.
I think that would, and now just listening to you and Brad, and as we kick this around, and I know you're saying that it was a throwaway comment, but we're going to dig into it and we're going to pick it apart now. I think this could be a series of like video conversations, assuming I thought anybody would even want to listen to me ramble on for hours, right? But
Oh,
I could
yes.
I could do
Yeah.
something like this on I could do something like this on my YouTube channel. Michael and I
Please.
could talk about this on Continuing Conversations. Maybe we
Yeah.
invite you guys in to talk about it. It
You
could be
should have
blog
people who
posts,
know
but
something
but
about
like,
it. Yeah.
blog posts and even putting it into a book, then what you're doing is you're kind of expecting somebody to go read it, right? And it's like, do I want to like kind of, and this goes into leadership um adult learning, right? People
Mm-hmm.
learn differently.
Yeah.
Some people like to read and learn. Some people like to listen and learn. Some people like to learn by doing and say like, here, do step A, do step B, step C, and they get their hands dirty and then they learn how to do it that way. So it would be like, I get what you're saying. Like you would love to have somebody kind of like walk through, I'm building this story. Here's things I'm thinking about in the now, but I'm also projecting ahead what's going to happen in scene 10 or what's going to happen in Act 3. How does Act 3 influence Act 1? How does Act 1 influence Act 2? How does it all come to a denouement? I got a great beginning. I know where my ending is. How do I get through all that dirty middle stuff to get to the cool ending? Um, all that's important for storytelling. It's super important for RPGs. I think more so for Captain's Log than for STA, right? Because I think
Yeah.
in an ideal world, STA as a game master, you're building the story with your players, right? Because that's the variable that you don't have in Captain's Log. You don't have to worry about players. They're not going to screw up your story because they're not there. It's just you and the random tables, right? But when you introduce the players, now you're creating this variable that as a game master you
Yeah.
can't entirely
That's
control.
cool.
And the difference between Star Trek Adventures and my personal experience with D&D, I'm not saying it's true for all people playing D&D, but like I know as a game master playing D&D, I always had this mindset of, okay, I'm preparing this D&D session. I have to spend hours making
Yeah.
sure that the challenge rating on the encounters is appropriate. I need to go find stat blocks. I need to find miniatures. I need to put this encounter together that I want them to encounter. And then I have to hope, can I steer the players along in the story so that they feel like they have agency, but at the same time I'm driving them to this encounter that I built for them and hope it works out, because otherwise they're going to be bored because they're playing D&D with me because they want to, bash
Yeah.
stuff and loot, and there's nothing wrong with that because that's a lot of fun. But that mentality doesn't work for Star Trek, and not just Star Trek Adventures, but I don't think it works for Star Trek because it's more dynamic, and I would never go into a Star Trek session with my head thinking, okay, in this session the players are going to encounter 6 Romulans in a command base, and they're going to have to go do this thing and go chase this MacGuffin or whatever. Like that's just not how I think Star Trek wise. Um,
Yeah.
what I would do though is I would give them opportunities and say, okay, now you're beaming into this planet. Your sensors pick up that there's 6 Romulans. And, what do you do? And the players can go all kinds of different directions. And in my experience, anyway, 95 times out of 100, the players will find the Star Trek. They will find the Star Trek diplomatic solution. So like even if I want them to like learn how to do space combat, they'll find the way to get around that space combat.
Yeah, I want the
your
pew pew.
So
Yeah,
hold on.
they like pew pew too, but they
Hold
just
on.
find a way to get around it.
To this exact, I think you are 100% right in that it's fairly unique to being in Star Trek. This was sometime last year, the last time Brad and I actually played
Mhm.
STA. I was running, what was it, Brad? We just had a few sessions over a couple months with you and Aaron again, and I had you guys. I was using I think actually one of the starter kit, one of the early adventures,
Okay.
and you guys were in engineering on an Oberth class. Oh, the Alcubierre.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was, God, that was well done. That was so well written, and so yeah, it
Is
was
that
so
the
much
one
fun.
Beyond the Stars? Is that the one
Yes,
that Michael
good.
wrote?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Start building
And
stars.
Mhm.
And this was set up to like be pew pew for this scene. And I know these guys, they're close friends of
Oh,
mine.
I know, but you're funny.
And, I adjusted it a bit because of there were two of them and whatnot. And it was lots of pew pew and it just, I should say, the potential was for a lot of pew pew and like they were both like, okay, how do we want to do this? And they were talking tactics, and like no one was running out to shoot anybody. And it's like, can we avoid this? And can we really get to the bridge?
We
It
ruined it for you
no,
because we didn't go
no,
the.
it was but it was so good. And
Yeah.
it's exactly what you're talking about. Like in any other setting, Brad would have been trying to pew pew everything in sight. Don't
Yep.
quote me out of context, although
But
probably still accurate.
no, no, no. Remember, because I told you I was going to play differently than
Yep.
I took this opportunity to play a Trek character, to play a character different than how I would be myself.
And we never right and you both did. And Aaron, who's like that was his first time ever playing any tabletop RPG.
Mhm.
Like, he's deeply immersed in Trek, but he's not role played or hadn't at that point. And you both just kind of fell in, and it's like, look, there's very little like violence or action per se going on. Instead, it's like really harrowing, and they're ducking for cover and they're planning and they're kind of treating like not like, oh, I've got whatever, this many hit points and it's going to be fine. It was a very Trek kind of, yeah, it was just a different level of plan. I never thought about that until right now, but that is absolutely, and I'm sorry, but if you can get guys like us to like, oh, let's think this through, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we're rolling dice. That's pretty cool.
yeah. No, that's great stuff.
So
And
funny.
I guess if I was going to try to summarize that a little bit, it would be to say that you know, Captain's Log and Star Trek Adventures are two. I mean, they're related certainly, but they're two slightly different things, right? And if you want to be, get into that storytelling and really get into the weeds on being a storyteller and stuff,
Hmm.
certainly lean toward Captain's Log. I think
Yeah,
telling a story with STA with a group of players is a slightly different experience, but still totally fulfilling, right? Because you're collaboratively doing something, and the dopamine that you can get off of that is like off
yeah,
the charts. Like
yeah, it is.
I remember having those
Yes.
sessions
Yeah,
with my group a couple years ago. Um, like we were so on the we were connecting so well and having such great experiences that like we were really good about ending our sessions at midnight, right? Like we that was our hard stop. And um I would be I couldn't come down.
right.
It would take me an hour and a half to come down off of it because it was just so exciting and fun to do it. And it's a different kind of creative energy than I get when I'm writing fiction, right? Or I'm working through Captain's Log.
Yeah,
It's still very
yeah,
creative and still a lot of
yeah.
energy, and it's very fulfilling, right? And, learning all the storytelling techniques and like imbuing all that and getting a really cool Star Trek story out. Um, it's just different, right? It doesn't have that same kind of collaborative feel. And I harken back to my old theater days where when you're working with a group of people for 12 weeks on a theater production
Mm.
and then you put it on stage and you're done like that, there is so much creative energy in that that you can't not can't it's just a different feel when you're doing that compared to when you're doing like a one act play and you're like you're doing a staged reading, right? And you're the only person doing the reading. It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
this is fulfilling and fun and I'm acting and I'm doing stuff,
yeah.
but I don't have that creative energy bouncing off somebody else, right? And working with somebody else. And I think that cool creative component is what makes RPGs so
Hmm.
amazing,
Hmm.
and which is why I think tabletop RPGs are always going to be superior to a computer game. Like I love
Yeah,
Skyrim.
yeah.
I've burned so many hours playing Skyrim, right? But like storytelling fulfilling wise, I always go back to the tabletop RPGs experiences I've had because with other people,
Right.
here's the leadership component, right? We're and not so much leadership, but I guess Star Trek is we're stronger together, we're better as a team,
Yes, absolutely.
and we tell better stories as a group as opposed to doing it individually. And I guess as a leader, this is where I can reflect on our topic of this of this episode is initially I think when I first got the reins of being project manager, there was a point in time, especially when the pandemic hit. Actually, it was here's the weird timeline. is Gen Con happened in August. They made me PM. We started working on the Klingon core book. That Christmas, my dad died. And then 3 months later, the pandemic hit, right?
Oh,
Oh,
So
Jim.
pow, pow,
it was
pow.
like bang,
Jeez.
bang, bang, and then the pandemic changed everything, right? Because like I couldn't go to my game group, I couldn't go anywhere. We were all at home. The world was
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And that's where I had to find that. That's where I found the online communities of Star Trek players. It's like, oh my gosh, I have no community anymore other than my family.
Yeah.
I need a connection. But there was a
Mm.
leadership component there where
Mm-hmm.
it was like we have to do this together. We have to come together as a team and work together to get this done remotely and everything else. And I lost where I was going with this, but
No, that's great.
um,
Okay, so
yeah,
we've kept you a long time, but
yeah,
I want to switch gears here.
all good.
Um, is there anything, we often ask each other this, is there anything on your desk as of late? Are you reading anything? Are you watch
This
anything
was our
that,
old GM corner, which we've
yeah,
turned into something different.
yeah, but yeah, like anything that you've just been enjoying lately?
Let me add it this way. If we were all sitting around a coffee shop or a
Yeah.
tea shop
There it
Mhm.
is.
just to talk about it, what would you have had on the table, having purchased or brought with to talk about?
Um, it just so happened that when I was in Minnesota for a week and a half, I had an opportunity to hit the local half price books
Mm-hmm.
near my in-laws house,
Mm-hmm.
and they just happened to have a copy of the making of DS9. And I had that
Funny.
moment of like,
Nice.
should I contact Brad and Jason just to say, hey, there's a copy here, I can grab a copy if you don't have it yet. But in the back of my head I was like, I think they might already have a copy. I think
Yeah, we did.
I've already
Hmm.
beaten that horse. I think they've got it.
But
But there
that's a
was a
good store. That's a
but there
good
was a new
store.
copy there, and or not new, but there was a
Yeah.
new-ish copy there for like
Yeah.
$5 or something. And
Jeez.
I was sorely tempted to just buy another copy of it. But then I was like, what the heck would I do with another copy of it other than gift it to somebody? So
Right.
I resisted that. But what did I just finish? I just finished reading. Now you're gonna make me look around and find it. I may have left it upstairs. Where is
He's
it?
looking furtively at his
I'm
bookshelf behind
looking
him.
furtively for the book and I can't find it. It was who is it? David the historian, David McCullough, John Adams.
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
He wrote
Yeah.
He's written a whole bunch of stuff. He wrote a book on the Brooklyn Bridge, and
Oh,
Oh,
that's interesting.
about the building of the Brooklyn Bridge, all the stuff that went into it, all the political shenanigans that I had literally no idea about.
Yeah.
The architect, the family, all this stuff. And it was a fascinating read, you know, partly because I don't know much about that period. I don't know how to build a bridge. But just like reading about this
I
architect.
can sell you one.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you?
So that is something I just recently finished reading, in and amongst all the work that I'm doing, right?
Oh,
And
cool.
it was really interesting. Like it's not quite my cup of tea, but
Yeah.
my partner read it and she really enjoyed it and she thought I would enjoy it. So I read it. And what I found more fascinating than the personalities, so like McCullough does a great job of bringing the personalities to life, right? So that we can understand who they were and what they were thinking, even if it's a character from 100 years ago or 150 years ago or whatever. Because our context now is so different, right? We live in a very different world than they lived in. But even that
Right.
being said, like we're still human.
Yep.
And like all the shenanigans that were involved in like the
Yeah.
politicking and the money and
Yeah.
the positioning and the posturing of all this stuff, it's just fascinating to see. Like we've certainly come a long way, but in other ways we have not come very far at all.
Yeah.
Or in fact in some cases we've regressed.
Right.
But I think my big takeaway from the book on the Brooklyn Bridge by McCullough was just the engineering that went into building this thing. Because like
Yeah.
I know I'm not an architect. I don't appreciate how buildings and bridges and stuff are made. Like I see them and I'm like, yeah, I mean clearly that skyscraper took effort to make, but like
Hmm.
if you really stare at it, you think about how in the world did they build a 100-story building?
Yeah.
Like how do you even build the crane
Right.
to
Right.
make the thing go up there. Like you got to build a crane. You got to have a crane to build a crane, and then you got to like. I just don't understand the mechanics involved. But so like there was one part where they're talking about having to build a gigantic wooden box that could sink into the river,
Right.
so that you could then build a cement form on top of it to act as the foundations of the bridge.
Yeah, it's
Right.
amazing.
And I'm like, wait a minute, you can't make the river go away. So you've got to figure out how to, like, you can't divert the river enough to like clear space for the surface of the of the
Yeah.
river. You've got to physically take this gigantic, huge wooden box, I mean, which is like massive, like half a city block in size, and sink that thing into the water with people in it,
Yeah.
like managing the pumps and managing all this stuff, and not have them die, right? Because
Yep.
this is the 1800s and like
I
things
mean,
were different.
how?
So it was just like it just really totally literally blew my mind.
Oh, that's so cool.
Like how they did this, and like there was one section where they were talking about how this massive gigantic wooden box, like you had to light it, so they had gas lanterns inside it, like
That's
propane
ridiculous.
lanterns or something. And there was one point where there was a fire in the gigantic wooden box, which was made of many layers of wood, right? Somewhere within one of those layers of wood, there was a fire. And because there were so many layers of wood, they didn't know where the fire was. They
Oh
knew
my
it was on
grief.
fire because they could see the smoke coming
Oh
through
my
the
God.
through the seams, but they were like, okay, this thing's on fire. Like it just blew my brain. Like how do you put out a fire that you can't even see, right? In the thing that if the entire thing gets engulfed in flames, then your entire project goes crashing to the ocean floor or whatever. But somehow they found a way to I can't remember. I think they flooded the box in such a way that eventually all the water put the fire out. But it just blew my
It's
brain
ridiculous.
for like, because I'm not an architect, right? I don't understand all this kind of stuff. So it was just a fascinating read. So I highly recommend it if you need
Oh,
to
that's great.
learn something really different than is probably like 180 degrees from your day-to-day life. Go check it out because it was fascinating, and I really credit the author McCullough for being able to write it in such a way that he made it accessible to the layman. And like I said, I'm beyond layman status as a bridge
Man.
builder. I don't know. So it was fascinating. So anyway, that's been on my desk, and I would love to know what you guys have been up to.
Well, before we say that, I just love the fact that whenever you
That's
come
so
on,
true.
it's usually material that isn't RPG related. So
Yeah.
I always
Yeah, you're right. We end up with a
I
book list or a reading
yeah,
list. Yeah, I
I
love it.
love that.
I
So
can't, because I'm a writer, right? I write. Well, I mean, if I wasn't working for Modiphius, I'd be writing fiction. I just don't have
Hmm.
enough time to write my own fiction right now. But
Yeah.
I as a writer though, I mean, and I've been doing this for 30 odd years. I can't remember how long now, but like I am constantly ingesting story, whether it's reading the newspaper, reading a blog, watching TV, reading
Right.
some random book off the shelf. Going to half price books is fantastic
Yeah, it is.
because like every store is different. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you what, there are 6 half price books within half an hour of the Twin Cities.
We're really lucky.
And I got to 4 of them. I got to 4 out of the 6. I couldn't get to the 2 that are further north and west of the city. I was
Hmm.
more down in the southeast
But
section.
you went to mine,
Um,
right?
what's that?
You went to mine, the
Um,
one in St. Paul proper.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, I was there
Mhm.
briefly. But like that's what I love about him is like even though it's the same store, just by the nature of the store, because they
Yep.
accept walk-ins and they accept trade-ins and stuff, every store has a different inventory, and it's
Yeah.
gonna be different every time you go. So like if you're
Hmm.
looking for something specific, you never know when you might run into it. And so
I'll
there was
show you.
just so many
I'll show
books I
you.
could pull off the shelf there. Yep.
That's over there. That's bins. That's all going to half price. So it's funny you
Yeah.
mentioned that.
Hmm.
I love it.
Yeah,
I
it's
love it.
such a great. Oh, I'm with you.
We only have one store in the DC metro area that I know of that's even remotely like that. And I wish half price books would come out this way, but they just haven't yet. They're mostly Midwest still. But I would love for them to open up a store out here because I know it would do gangbusters in the DC
Yeah.
metro area. Because like even though everybody here is working for the government and is working the really high price jobs, we're still cheap, and we want good books, and we want to trade books back and forth. Like this is a very like maybe not as much as Minnesota, because I think the Twin Cities is super literate and very hip.
Yeah, but DC is super literate. That
DC
area
is, but
is.
Northern
Yeah.
Virginia not quite so much.
Okay.
But I think Northern Virginia is desperate for some good used bookstores that could do that kind of thing. And I would love to love to see it happen, but don't know what that would involve. But anyway, so tangent aside, what do you guys what have you all been reading or watching or ingesting?
Brad?
I've been on I don't know if maybe we've talked about it with you or not. Some folks, I'm a big alt history person, so I read a lot of Harry Turtledove.
Nice.
And so I'm rereading some older stuff that he's done that came out in some magazines, some shorter stories. I inadvertently met him when we connected in a sports game forum years back. So once I realized he was into sports, I read his stories and I'm catching names of sports heroes and that he integrates into it. So I like rereading them now and saying, oh, okay, you have a guy in here named Irving Morrill. Well, Earl Morrill was a quarterback for the Dolphins that did very well. So I could see the link there. And so I've been reading through that. But the problem is that I'm getting behind in my Star Trek reading. Thanks to you, I do the 99-cent books every month. In fact, even my wife was like, why do we have all these 99-cent transactions? And I can't use
just don't.
I just can't say, well, I need it for podcasts anymore. I just say it's my Kindle stuff. So I'm about 8 to 10 books behind on Star Trek. But though, to be honest with you, that's where my focus, I told Jason, that's where my focus has been really is there. And some of the stuff I picked up over some of the RPG stuff I picked up over the holidays. And I want to make this point before I go to you, Jason. This is way out of left field. I think when we talk about RPG as lit, Jason, you're the one that forwarded me a tweet from Will Wheaton where he talked about pulling some RPG books off the shelves.
Oh yeah,
he may never play them. He'll read them, which is what we're talking about.
That's one angle.
Yeah, that's one angle of RPG is lit. The other one is what Captain's Log has done is creating lit from RPGs.
Right.
So I've been going in from one angle, and to be honest with you, we've been talking about coming in from the other with creating lit from RPGs because it's my fault that we're behind on some of the Captain's Log stuff. So, but
that's all right. It'll be there for you.
Yeah.
Yep. That's right.
Just let it simmer.
It's marinating.
It is. Yeah.
What does Stephen King call them? The boys upstairs, the writers upstairs, the team upstairs, whatever it is, whatever his analogy is, the people back there marinating it. It'll come back to the front in due course.
I think so.
Jason, how about you?
I have been rereading I just started this about a week ago, The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, so good.
Good. So I mean, it seems like not a whole lot more than yesterday. So I didn't read those. I grew up with The Hobbit, but I didn't read The Lord of the Rings. So what was
one volume, not the individuals.
Yeah. So I'm going to take the three one at a time. I'll read stuff between.
But are you reading it out of the single volume?
Yeah. So that's what I was going to tell Jim, because you and I have, we've gotten all giddy over this. So I never read The Lord of the Rings until around what was like 01 or 02 when the movies were coming out, 01-ish. And I thought, okay. So 20 some years ago, which is I don't know how any of us are old enough to say 20 some years ago I was reading this book, but I thought, okay, I've got to read these before the movies come out because I've seen them. I'm going to see the movies, and I don't want to see the movie and then read it because they'll be root, right? The books will be. So those came out over like 2.5 years or whatever, and so I would read each one like prior to the movies coming out. Like that was my deadline set. Okay, and I loved it. I'm not a fantasy guy. I mean, I enjoy D&D and all that stuff, but I'm not a fantasy reader. lots of sci-fi, but not, I don't even like sci fantasy really,
Mhm.
Star Wars aside. Um, but I mean, yeah, like you said, so good. I mean, the single most creative, intelligent thing I've ever read. And I mean, it's my line of work. I think I've read a lot of creative, intelligent things, but right, Tolkien, that's just a different level. So
Mhm.
then over the holiday season, actually it was right around or after Cyber Monday.
It
Because
was a
I
Cyber Monday
Oh, what
deal.
was it? Okay. Because I
Yeah.
texted Brad, and so I didn't 2 years ago, or I guess as we're recording now, because it was so like around 21, so I guess like 2.5-ish years ago. Um, you've probably seen this, Jim. The Lord of the Rings was reprinted. That's always happening, but it was reprinted in this absolutely gorgeous version that had the Eye of Sauron on the cover,
Mhm.
in and it was all gilded pages and right and the the statement of the ring, right? One ring to rule them all is written on on the page edges in the language of Mordor in that ancient
Mhm.
Elvish. Maybe that's redundant. And I had never ever bought a book because it was pretty,
Yeah.
but this thing was gorgeous. Yeah, Brad just posted it so that Jim
Oh
can get
no.
one before this conversation is over. The problem was, and I'd seen it in a store. The
Yeah.
problem was it's $75.
Yeah.
Except on Cyber Monday it was 28.
It wasn't even 28,
It
I
was,
thought.
oh, sorry, maybe with shipping, it was 28.
Yeah, it was like
So
23 or something.
yeah,
It
I
was
think you're right.
crazy.
So it was like, so I got it and it was selling hot because like even Amazon was reporting like a week before you would get it.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm gonna read it again. This is something I've thought about over the years.
Hmm.
So it's been on my shelf for a couple months. And about a week ago, I thought, okay, now's the time. I'm between other books. Uh, I'm gonna read it. And you know what? It's even better this time around. I just got through the whole Tom Bombadil thing. Those
Hmm.
2.5 chapters I didn't care for the first time. I didn't care for them the last time or the second time. They totally unnecessary, but they just arrived at the Prancing Pony, and now for the next 2 3/4 books, this is gonna be awesome.
And it only
So
took us 27 minutes to hear what Jason is reading,
I
which is
know.
Lord of the Rings.
Well, context is important. Look,
The
you,
context matters, and
context matters.
I appreciate that you
Books have
both
stories.
love. I appreciate that you both love well-made books, right?
Oh my God.
Oh,
I have pretty successfully embraced ebooks, right? Because it's so much easier to carry, and like I've got,
Sure.
1,000 books on this little teeny tiny
Oh my
device here.
God.
I
Yeah.
can't beat that. That's fantastic. Like for me, when I have to go to like a when I take my son to a doctor's appointment, or I have to go to a doctor's
Yep.
appointment, or I'm waiting at the garage or something, or I'm on a plane, like to be able to carry my entire freaking library in one little handy dandy device, and it's just amazing, instead of having this big heavy brick of a book with me, right? Especially when we're talking about Lord of the Rings. But when I'm at home though, and I can savor the pages and the gilt and the full color illustrations and stuff. In fact, Jason, you've inspired me, because
Awesome.
2 years ago, 3 years ago, no, it was when the heck was it? It was I put one of the big books to bed. It might have been the Discovery book. It might have been it wasn't Lower
Mhm.
Decks. It was before that. It was before Utopia Planitia. Anyway, I discovered, just because I'm on this Facebook group for Tolkien nerds, right? I discovered that HarperCollins
Yes.
is
Yes.
does reprints of course they reprint all the Lord of the Rings stuff, right?
Yeah.
But Christopher Tolkien has been editing, or I mean,
Hmm.
I guess he just passed away, but he was editing a lot of his dad's stuff,
Hmm.
and this book came out, The Fall of Numenor. I don't know if you've
I
seen
haven't
it.
read it.
I've
I
Yeah.
was
heard of
like,
it.
okay, I knew The Fall of Numenor was coming out, and I wanted to read it, and I was planning on buying a copy of it, but because I happened to be on this Facebook group for Tolkien geeks, someone was like, "Oh, by the way, did you all know that HarperCollins is creating deluxe slipcase editions of all of the books and stuff?"
There
And I
you
was like,
go.
Oh,
"Huh? What's this?" And I'm a sucker for a really well put together book. But anyway, so as a gift to myself for finishing whatever Star Trek product,
Nice.
I don't remember which one it was, I went ahead and bought the deluxe edition of the Fall of Numenor.
Oh, look at
It's a
that.
slipcase, beautiful slipcase. I
Yeah,
haven't even opened this. I've had this thing for 2 years, and I
oh,
haven't had time to sit down and open it yet. So you have inspired me, Jason, because I know
oh,
I have some free
good.
time coming up
Yeah.
because of the job situation. I am going to when I'm ready to sit down and start reading, because I just finished that book on the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm going to crack this cellophane off of this thing, and I'm going
Nice.
to give this a read and enjoy the book because
And
Please let us.
you'll honor Christopher as well, because I know he
yes,
was 95 when he passed away.
yeah,
Man, oh man.
that's amazing. I won't get there, but I'm grateful that he
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Please let us know how that is.
I will absolutely.
I mean, I obviously read The Hobbit and I read The
Yeah.
Silmarillion, which is a different kind of book. I enjoyed that.
Hmm.
Both of those, by the way, they reprinted the same way, turns out.
Both of those were
Those are
ordered
recorded.
by me, thanks to
There it
some.
is.
Well,
I
no,
thought
no,
that might happen.
I had because I have to be much more cautious
Yeah.
now. I got some Amazon gift
Oh,
cards for birthday, so
Yeah.
I
nice.
put them towards the other two because I
Yeah.
really would like to. And you and I have talked about this, Jason. Do we? It's such a gorgeous book. Do you actually read the
Well,
book?
I'm reading it. I'm being careful. It's not traveling with me if I go
Yeah.
somewhere. But I've but I was saying I read because he was coming, Christopher Tolkien, for a while he was coming out, right? He had been editing his father's work, and they
Mhm.
were like, it seemed like every year or two
Yeah. There's a
there
lot.
was another, and so I can't see it from where I am. I don't remember. It was one of the first ones of those. It was the something and something. I think it was one of the set of First Age Tales.
Hmm.
But the Fall of Numenor, please let us know what you think, because
I will.
that one does sound intriguing to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we want to get playing the One Ring, right?
We actually,
I
yeah,
would
we
love to.
do.
I mean, I got the second edition. I just haven't had a chance to really do anything with it other than appreciate it.
Yeah,
We'll talk offline about that one,
Yeah,
because
okay.
that's
yeah.
Okay, absolutely. But no, I think yeah, so thank you, Jason, for the inspiration. I'm definitely gonna
Oh,
give this
thrilled.
a go here pretty soon.
Yeah, Les. Jim, we got to let you go, but thank you so much. I mean, every time
Yeah.
to just keep coming back and hanging out with us. Even if you beat my bad ideas like a dead horse, it's totally worth it because now I've thought it through. Because like every time we talk with you,
Yeah.
every time I go to bed and my mind is going.
Hmm.
Like the stuff we've talked about,
Yeah.
often not RPG at all.
Hmm.
And so I know I won't be sleeping for a while, but it's totally worth it because we love spending time with you.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I'm grateful that you brought me back. And no, I think the idea you had, I love picking it apart with you and Brad, because you're giving me inspiration for something to do when because I've left my YouTube channel pretty much just sit for a while because I've been so
Yeah, you
busy.
should do it.
And it's like, oh well, now you've given me a fresh new topic
Sweet.
that I can go expound on and see what happens. And I have to admit though, I know we've talked about TikTok on a couple of our previous conversations. Um, I'm I've been um like just mentally have been needing a break in the evenings to fall asleep. So I've been watching a lot of TikTok. I will, it's a guilty pleasure, I will admit it. But I'm now at the point where I've watched enough TikTok that I'm thinking about what would I do if I was going to be on TikTok? Because I got to keep it short, I got to keep it
I
snappy.
know.
Maybe I can do something Star Trek Adventures related on
Oh,
TikTok.
cool.
Just
And
keep it 2 minutes. You could do what I found out is you could do a
yeah,
lot
two
in two
minutes, under
minutes.
2 minutes, maybe like a
Yeah.
snippet of insight or information. Like, here's the core mechanic. Here's how to here's two ideas on how to use threat. Here's two ideas on how to use momentum. Maybe you're like, I'm just trying to think about like, what does that look like?
That would actually get me on TikTok.
Yeah.
Oh, my texts
Yeah,
get you on
yeah.
TikTok.
Well,
I
that's
don't want
because
to
you
encourage TikTok, right? I don't want to
Yeah.
help them.
no, but that would yeah, I would sign
Yeah.
up so I could watch those. That sounds cool.
Right. But the longer form for YouTube, which is the longer form,
Even better.
I think the idea that we were kicking around here talking about you know, writing a story, but thinking
Mhm.
about it from the Star Trek lens and also from the game master lens, I think there's some potential there for some cool stuff.
Yeah, that
So
would be neat.
I'll have to give that some thought. Of course, all the stuff that we had talked about at our launch too
Yeah,
is stuff still percolating in my
that's
brain.
great.
So, but yeah, I'm so grateful that you guys are
Mm.
doing this show because it's so amazing when I have like I watch it, I listen to it in the background, right? When I'm working, I can, because I can just you guys just riff off each other so well. I mean, clearly you've known each other forever, and that helps. You can see the relationship coming through the podcast. But it's just like you have great guests and great
Look at that
ideas,
monkey.
and just again, just like tonight, just coming up with those ideas. It's just fun and very conversational and very easy to talk to. So I'm just grateful you keep inviting me back. So thanks, I appreciate it.
You're always
Oh,
welcome
God,
back,
thank you.
because we talk some about RPGs, but then we go off into so many different directions that it's
As it
always
should
unique.
be.
It's always unique and different.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And that's why I really enjoy coming back. And I hope when I get back to Minnesota sometime later in the year, I hope we get a chance to connect.
Yeah, we'll all get together.
Oh,
Plan
we'll
on
all
it.
get together.
Yeah.
In fact, if we need to find a way to drive south and meet halfway somewhere, like I don't know what's halfway between the Twin Cities and where you are.
I'm always overdue.
Oh.
I'm always overdue in going up to see,
Yeah.
Jason, his family, and Jason's brother and his family.
And I'm overdue to go to Milwaukee. So
yeah,
I was thinking about that today.
So I will get up there because I was supposed to go up this last year and I wasn't able to. So this time around, I'm making it up there, even if I go up and crash. Jason, you've done it. You've come down, crashed, and left the next day.
Yep.
When
Absolutely.
we saw Shatner. So
yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, gentlemen. Well, I hate to say goodbye because like I could talk all night, but I know it's midnight here. I know it's 11 o'clock your time. So
I'm just waking up. Jason's past his bedtime by about 4 hours.
And it's still a work day, right? So want to be respectful for us to have to go back to that. So
you guys go back to work.
Yeah. Again, thanks. Hopefully we'll talk again soon here. If not, I'll be talking to you on the X and on email and all that great stuff. So
and keep in touch if you ever need to talk about the job stuff that we've chatted before about. You know how to get me.
You're on my short list, buddy.
All righty.
In fact, I'm at a point where I need a brain to talk to. So
nice. Anytime. Anytime.
Yeah, I'll be reaching out, buddy.
All right.
Okay, back to you.
Take care,
y'all. Be well.
Bye now. As always, Jim, thank you so much. I think it just is when we talk, it's one of those things where at the end we realize, oh yeah, he's the PM for STA because we have similar interests. You have interests in areas that we don't. I'm always fascinated. We always hear about books that aren't on our shelves or aren't on our reading lists that should be. The one about the Brooklyn Bridge, I'm fascinated by.
Yeah.
That he talked about. It truly is when we have him and we have others on, it just reminds me that it's truly what our podcast is. People sitting around having coffee, tea, drink of choice, and talking about anything that pops up. And
that's right.
It's been our modus operandi going back 30 years, 32 years now. That's how we've operated.
Yep.
And we continue to do that. And now we're just very lucky to meet all these cool people and be able to continue to do that.
Yeah. Jim, I'll just say again, on behalf of both of us, thanks as always. You can plan on being back on Dice and Mind before too long.
Why don't we, like we always have done, we used to, and we are in effect recreating it now. Let's head out to Audubon Court.
I've got my cup of tea right here.
I was just going to say, I was going to ask you, honestly, I know this isn't about tea, but I was going to ask you because we would talk about tea forever. Amongst other things, what are you drinking? It was always Desert Sage with you.
Oh, well,
but I doubt you're drinking that now. What do you?
No, because I don't know if Republic of Tea even makes that anymore. So no, I am drinking. It's so good. I started ordering loose leaf again. From our local store. One of the problems is they closed the storefronts, but they're still in business because they basically do B2B. And so I just thought, you know what, I'm going to pay for shipping, even though it's across town. And so I am drinking a cup of Golden Buddha from Tea Source. which is here in the
Okay.
Twin Cities, which is wonderful. It's delicious. I mean, it's actually one of the best black teas I've ever had anywhere. It is, I mean, I really, yeah, when I see
Yeah.
I've got to make you some. I don't remember, I have to look it up, so no one quote me. I don't remember if it's like a Fujian or an Anshui province tea, but it's a black tea. It's like a Chinese red tea, but it is produced somewhat akin to an oolong. It's just really, really good and fairly complex. It's not heavy. It's super drinkable, a little pricey, but the good ones are.
I kind of know the answer. Do you sweeten? I know we don't, neither of us use milk.
No,
Um,
no, never.
okay.
I mean,
So
no, no, never. Mm-mm.
I'm gonna pose this way this week, but I think I'm gonna try using this just because you are a reader and a writer. Um, so what has been um coming out of your pen, or what that didn't sound right, did it?
Nope, not at all.
Okay.
And I am so not
What has
editing
been
that out.
yeah,
Live with
no,
it.
we'll leave that in there. We'll leave that in there. Um what's been on the paper when you've had pen to paper, or where's your bookmark been lately? That didn't
Again,
sound
you
right
are
either,
zero
did
for
it?
two. You just
Oh,
Brad's just going to
darn.
stop
Oh,
talking now as I
oh,
answer these
okay.
questions.
What have you been
Um,
writing, or what have you been reading
of
this
all the
past
fish
2 weeks?
above the fireplace. Okay.
Oh God, that's
Deep cut.
luckily those are like not
Mixed
direct, so
metaphors.
we don't have to explicit. But for
Yeah,
those that
yeah,
are adults, they're gonna laugh. Go ahead.
yeah. Or shake their head dismissively like our wives.
Or cry. Or
Or
cry.
like our
Yeah.
wives. I
Yeah.
I've been busy writing. And now I'm kind of in the editing stage, revision stage. And I'll just say that about that, but reading is very exciting. So I am just a few chapters away from finishing my reread of the Fellowship of the Ring.
You're using, we talked about this with
Yep,
Jim. You're
this is
using
the one.
the new
Yes,
copy.
this
Okay.
gorgeous one. Oh my God, is a beautiful photo. In fact, we were passing a photo of it back and forth online with Jim. Um, yeah,
Oh,
as we talked about, so I'll keep this brief. And we've talked about this in the past because we both bought a copy over the well, Black Friday or Cyber Monday. Uh,
mhm.
it was time. I'm rereading The Lord of the Rings. I'm a few chapters away. I'll read one more shorter chapter tonight.
Mhm.
And it's kind of getting to me though, Brad, because like I'm thinking because I'm reading a lot in the evening, like I'm falling asleep thinking of it, of this story. Right there. Uh, Gandalf has perished? Question mark. Courtesy the Balrog. They've just made it. The company, Sans Gandalf, has just made it to Lothlorien, and so hilarity will ensue. No.
Mhm.
But it's wonderful, and I will say, I read this 20-ish years ago, and I was new to the story beyond The Hobbit, okay? Or save for The Hobbit. Uh, I I am enjoying it more this time than the first time, and I loved it the first time. Um, I it I understand so much more of what's going on, Brad. I had no idea the first time I read how much foreshadowing was written throughout the entire story. It's just it's still, I think, the most creative and most intelligent thing I've ever read. But this second time, it's even better because, like, I don't remember lots of specifics, but I remember the characters, the arc, etc., etc. It's so good. How about you? What are you reading? What's
Well,
on your desk?
I got a comment on just that, and then I'll
Hmm.
talk about that quick. Um, I've always found it interesting, and I am not a scholar on this. I don't know, but Tolkien was an editor and helped translate what is called the Jerusalem Bible, which is
I
a
don't think I knew that.
translation that is used in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
So it includes some of the deuterocanonical books.
Canonical.
Um,
Mhm.
Canonical. Thank you.
Mhm.
I that Protestant Bible doesn't have.
Right.
Now he'll argue if you read briefly, he'll argue and say, no, I was just more of an editor and all that. So I don't know how much he was involved in it, but
Yeah.
that is
Interesting.
a claim to fame for that translation. I only bring that up because once I read it, it'll be interesting to go back and see the areas where he has had his mark apparently in the Jerusalem Bible. It's not a translation I normally read, no disrespect, but I don't know the time period in which he did that versus when he did Lord of the Rings. But does one have an effect on the other, one way or the other? I'm just curious.
Just to put things in perspective, it says something about the author or the editor. It says something about the individual when a translation of the Christian Bible's claim to fame is J.R.R. Tolkien did the translating.
But here's what's interesting. I realized that I had heard that for the first time around the time that we were going to Audubon Court. And that's when I picked up back in the day a copy of that Bible, which sits on my shelf to this day. So
cool.
95, 96. So
I mean, obviously we talked about it, but I have no recollection.
I've forgotten about it until we've really talked about Lord of the Rings. For me, just because I'm going to be doing some traveling next week, and I think not our we're going to record tomorrow. We'll talk about that in that episode. But the next recording after that, I will be from I don't want to use any Mar-a-Lago
not on this podcast.
Parallels. No. I will be from my parents' house in Central Florida. So I'm going to spend some time down there, and I'm going to bring my mic. Luckily for me, I'm an amateur and just use a pair of headphones and a mic.
That's how we roll.
So we'll be able to do some recording and stuff down there. So most of my reading has been on the Kindle, just because I'm prepping and I don't want to necessarily take. Like I don't want to. I am going to read Lord of the Rings. I'm going to read because we both have the same volume, but I don't want to start it now because I don't want to transport it.
Right. Whereas on the Kindle, you can just have the risk, whatever you want.
Yeah. I don't want to risk damaging that copy because it's such a beautiful printing. So I'm reading some generalized stuff, but just when it comes to RPGs, one of the games that I picked up in the holiday sales is the Infinity RPG. And I think I may have talked about this a little bit. I've alluded to it. I've been looking through just because from my understanding, and I might be wrong, it's one of the earlier releases of Modiphius that predated like Star Trek Adventures and all that.
Okay.
And so it's got a little bit more grit and it's a little bit more crunchy. It's very cool. It's still 2D20, so it still has that elegance, but there's a little bit more in terms of where you roll. But I just find it fascinating because you'll see people talk out on Reddit and such. They'll say like, "Oh, we love it." It goes, but it kind of, and this is what I get a kick out of. I've seen this a lot. I think it predates the streamlining and the changes that Modiphius made to kind of the 2D20 to tweak it that happened in Star Trek Adventures. And they use that as like a marking point where to something that, and that's one of the reasons I'm reading it, is I want to see the differences, because you'll read out on Reddit people talking about that. Beyond that, that's what's been on my table. Infinity was based off of a tabletop miniatures game that they've converted into an RPG.
I didn't
Neither one
realize
of us
that.
are.
Okay.
Yeah, neither one of us are
No.
Are not miniatures guys. So, but I find the idea of the game, and much like Star Trek Adventures, they have these tile sets where you can actually use, much like you can use a dungeon map in high fantasy. That one and the other one you and I have, much thanks to our friends at Green Ronin, is the Fantasy Age 2nd edition. You've mentioned this out on Twitter. Phenomenally designed.
Yeah, I will say, I think we can close with this if we want. I will, in the coming days, I will be done reading Fellowship of the Ring, and then I'll take a break, right? I'll like I did the first time, I'll take a break to read other things in between, and I'll read each one, so as not to go to overload. But I am starting to very much want to play Fantasy Age 2E because of this. So You all are going to hear more.
But you've been in the
high.
You're in the high fantasy.
In the high fantasy. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. And a high fantasy that you enjoy, in that the magic is prevalent but subtle. It's not all in your face. Everyone's got it.
Yeah, I mean, when you fight, you think about battles on a game. You don't have magic users and wizards and all that shooting firebolts or icicles or whatever the case is.
And they might be magic wielders, but it's subtler than that. There are no magic missiles. They might be doing incantations and, breaking a bridge, doing whatever they need to do. But it's just it's different. It's a different feel. So yeah, well, we got to get into that before long. All right, everybody. As always, thanks for being here with us. Thanks for hanging into this 14-hour episode. Coming to a Dice and Mind podcast near you. We have some really interesting people, more interesting people, coming your way. Stay tuned. In the interim, be well, stay well. We will see you in a couple of weeks.